You don't know how great I am. You don't know how great I am. I am what I am, and I am free. You don't know how great I am.
Yo, check this. I might not be what you want me to be, so you might not see what you want to see. But if you got a minute, listen to what I gotta say, cause it's a brand new year and it's a brand new day. See, there's a gap between my culture and the life that I lead, so some will call me an apple, and some a bad seed. They have no idea how my heart will bleed. Their words and attitudes are things I just don't need.
You don't know how great I am. I am what I am, and I am free.
You see, I'm proud of who I am, and I'm proud of where I'm from. Those ones spreading racism, they're just fucking dumb. Now, if you're looking at my life and you say I've assimilated, to simplify things, just a little more complicated. See, I'm a modern day native with a modern day life. I have modern day problems and modern day strife. Now I hear other natives, they talk about the past, and will I do the same? Fuck that. See, I've got no time to dwell on what's already done. I've got too many things that I want to do. And they don't include knives, and they don't include guns. I'm talking about knowledge and sharing it too. See, my people need to learn how to cohabitate, get rid of the anger, and get rid of the hate. We gotta stop for a minute and learn to educate. And you'll see in the end, we all have to communicate. I know there'll be a time to make a stand and a time to fight, but if you do that, make sure the cause is right. Because if the cause is right, and the cause is just, greater numbers of people will be backing you up. History has repeatedly shown to us all that united we stand and divided we fall. They were talking about natives and natives alone, because this is a big world, and this world is our home. Now I've seen some beautiful people, and ugly ones too, and there's no single color that comes into view. So the message I'm sending, it's not all that long. It's just, I want the human race to be stronger than strong. I said I just want the human race to be stronger than strong.
You all have to be strong.
Done it. Word.
We all have to be strong. Peace.
Sgoli swagwag, galahindi neo gets, wagisli wagi ni wakitaloda, onida okingwe wanege, ani bojo danse, okinapi, how, yonko, yukwedonlas, skananaga. For those of you who are new, I always introduce myself in my original language. So I said Skoli Swagwag, or hello everyone. Galahindi Neo Gets. So Galahindi is my name. It translates to clouds passing over in the colonial language. And I'm a member of the people of the Standing Stone First Nations of the Thames, which is on the northern part of Turtle Island, the part that's been segregated and relabeled Canada. And within the confines of that definition, I'm in a small section called Southwestern Ontario. And I'd said, Yanko, Yugodona, or thank you, friends, for being here and welcome. And I appreciate everyone who can pop in and hopefully take something from my streams. Now, if you haven't been here before, what I do is everything indigenous. So the content that I share is related to the original people of Turtle Island, whether that be the Métis, the Inuit, the First Nations, or the Mexicanos. Um, Some nations will actually include Central America as part of Turtle Island, depending on, what nation that you speak with. So we kind of try to encompass all of the original peoples of this territories. So today, um, if you have any updates or suggestions or anything that you'd like to see that covered in these streams that you haven't heard or seen yet, join the Discord and put in your suggestions there, and we will try to keep those in mind. What I don't know or what I can't find out, I have elders that mentor me, that I always go to, and they actually come to the stream occasionally as well, just to answer questions and be part of the stream, so that you can talk to them directly in some cases. So that's really kind of cool. Now, what I'm thinking I'm going to try to do, if you've been here for any length of time, you'll know that my last couple months have been kind of scattered and all over the place as far as schedule wise with my streams. My work schedule has kind of settled and be stabilized, so I'm hoping that um, that will also mean that my streaming schedule will be more consistent. So what I'm thinking I'm going to, and this it may not be set in stone, it could be an experiment, but I'm thinking Tuesday mornings at 9 a.m. are going to be documentary days. So this is going to be the time when I share documentaries or I share educational content. Wednesday evenings, 7 o'clock, I will start doing our music video parties. So where we really just push and promote indigenous musicians, because we don't get the radio play, the marketing, all that other stuff that mainstream artists get. And so what we want to do today is I want to go over a couple of things, primarily because they've come up in the news recently, and I think that there is maybe a little bit of clarification that could happen, and maybe just some general updates as to how the news is presenting the information. So before I do that, um, what I'm going to do today is I'm going to start the stream out with by smudging, primarily because today I do want to give you a heads up. Some of the content is not going to be necessarily really easy to listen to. So I do ask that you take care of your mental health, and I always want to kind of put this out there again, because today's content, maybe not so much the first part, but the second part of it would definitely be somewhat triggering for some people. So just so you're aware, I'll give you that heads up now. And if at any point you feel like you need to speak with someone, always know that there's somewhere that you can get resources to help and truly take care of your mental health. And I want to say welcome in, Dave Moon. Nice to, Yanko, nice to see you here. So when I say I smudge, for the First Nations people out there, you're all going to know what I'm doing. For those who are not Indigenous or don't know what smudging is, we have my nation has essentially in this area have four primary medicines that we use. We use sweetgrass, kind of as a uh, what known as Mother Earth's hair. We braid it and we burn it and we use it to smudge to kind of remove all of the negativity from us and um, dark thoughts, and try to help start things out in a good way. And you'll see that's why we smudge before we start ceremonies and things at gatherings, primarily because we always want to start things out in a good way. We use cedar as a healing medicine. So cedar is used for teas, used for smudging, or used for our baths. So there's a multitude of things that you can use cedar for to help with healing. We use tobacco as an offering medicine. So anytime that we harvest our medicines, we always lay down tobacco as a way of thanking Mother Earth for what she's providing us. We also offer it to elders when they give us teachings or they give us guidance as a way of thanking them and showing respect. And we offer it to our sacred fires to carry our prayers to the Creator. And then the last thing is sage. And we use sage because it's the woman's medicine. It's the only medicine that's really strong enough to be used during a woman's moon time. And so it's the only medicine that women are to use during that time of the month. And so when you go to a lot of public ceremonies where everyone is welcomed, you will often see sage being used primarily because it refrains us from having to go around and ask women, um, is it that time? It just awkward conversations. This way we can use the medicines and it'll be good for everyone um, to take and smudge with. So I put mine in the shell. Just primarily because we always want to keep our medicines in something that is organic or from the earth and from the natural world. When we do is we light the medicines, and when you light the medicines, it's going to create a smoke, and that smoke is what we use when we smudge. So we put it over our minds again, so we can clear our minds and uh, take out any kind of negative thoughts and help us think in a more productive and positive way. Put it over our eyes so we can see the good things around us and see things in a clear way. Put it over our mouths so when we speak, we are speaking our truth. And we're speaking our truth again in a good way. That's going to help um, move the conversation forward rather than create conflict. And we put it over our hearts because our hearts really is the backbone of our spirit, and we always want to keep our heart healthy, and so we put it over. And if you ever go to a ceremony and you've had an extra stressful day, and you see the person going around, the helper going around with the medicines, don't hesitate to ask them to wait. And let you smudge for a little longer. If you need an extra few minutes to smudge and because you've had a harder day, then that's what they're there for. That's why they're doing this, going around with the medicines, is to allow you a moment to ensure that you're entering that ceremony or that event in a positive and good way. And if you need that extra time to do that, then let them know, because they won't hesitate to to wait for you and allow you some extra time to do that. So Uh, we always try to smudge at any beginning of any ceremony or any gathering to ensure, again, that everything is started in a good way. So the first thing we wanted to cover today um, is, I think, the direction that the news has taken on the Wetsuweten conflict. Um, so news has never truly been providing information in favor of land defenders or water protectors. Often, the news is showing clips of tipped vehicles and fires being set, and roadways and railways being blocked, etc. Always showing things in a very kind of dark, negative context when it comes to the indigenous people. And so, just a few days ago, there was a news segment that I want to share. And what was really interesting about the timing of this broadcast is that it happened on the very same day as the RBC AGM, and then we'll get into that a little bit later on. But the timing of it, I think, is interesting because of the corporate interest that happens with this. So I'm going to start this with the news article. Um, that the news segment that was just released a few days ago, so that you can see um, uh, what how they're presenting things right now. And you know what? It is as mainstream media goes. Um, Lassie, you're probably right. The mainstream media really does slant the news in the interest of corporations, and that's kind of where we have to always be cautious of what we watching when we see things, because the real news that gives the other side of the story oftentimes is independent news outlets. Um, Democracy Now, or other sources that aren't paid by government or funded or monitored by government agencies. So let me get my face off the screen here then, and we'll get started with this first segment here. And
Between the North Coast Mountains and the Bulkley Valley lies a glacier-fed river that is breathtaking in its beauty. But in recent years, it's also been the scene of ugly confrontation.
Don't point your gun at me!
It's a summer Wetsuweten man!
A series of RCMP raids on protesters defying a court order. And with every raid, the temperature rose until things boiled over and led to this. But who would go so far, and why?
I know we would never, ever tell anybody or support anybody to do any kind of damage.
Hereditary Chief John Risdale wants to show us what the battle here is all about. The Wet'suwet'en call it Wet'zenkwa.
Wet'zenkwa means blue, green, pure river.
Couldn't be more clear from here.
It's beautiful.
But when he reaches the river's edge, he finds the water is far from clear.
That seems awful dirty for this time of year.
Just upstream, crews are tunneling under the riverbed to make way for a section of the Coastal GasLink pipeline. He's been trying to get up close. Security won't let him.
I don't need to make arrangement with anybody. I'm Chief Namox, and this is Wet'suwet'en territory.
But Chief Namox is turned away because the worksite is also a crime scene. They emerged from the forest around midnight in February of last year, firing flare guns and swinging axes into the side of security trucks. An excavator on site was used to destroy other heavy machinery and mobile trailers. The estimated damage as high as $20 million.
It was planned, it was practiced, and carried out in a very methodical manner.
Chief Superintendent John Brewer is in charge of the Community Industry Response Group, or CIRG, an RCMP unit formed to police resistance to the pipeline and other projects like it. 8 months after the worksite attack, the CIRG was also targeted in a late-night arson attack. 4 RCMP vehicles and some others nearby destroyed. It wasn't always like this. For more than a decade, protests against the pipeline had been peaceful. But the last RCMP raid in the fall of 2021 marked a major turning point. For the first time in the conflict, the protesters were charged with criminal contempt of court. And at the same time, Coastal GasLink was finally able to ramp up operations here. That's when things turned violent down at the worksite. That was more than a year ago. RCMP had 40 investigators on the case, a $100,000 reward had been posted, and the attackers are still out there. How close are you to making an arrest, timeline-wise?
I have been saying to my team, we are weeks away for the last few months, certainly before the new year. I believe we are that close.
This is the first time he's revealing key details of the investigation into the worksite attack, saying police have identified more than half a dozen suspects and have been tracking their movements. Examining videos like this one the protesters posted just weeks before the attack. A masked and camo-wearing group pulling trees and tires across the road. Was it a rehearsal? They're the same impediments officers encountered trying to get up the only road to the worksite that night. So how did the attackers escape, if not down that road? Police say the group fled the worksite on snowmobiles, using the pipeline right-of-way, which runs parallel to the road. When they reached a protest camp, the attackers made their getaway in waiting trucks, while police were still busy assessing the threat at the worksite and securing the crime scene. Investigators later recovered DNA evidence there, the destruction also holding clues. Not everyone knows how to operate an excavator, and police know who among the protesters can. But after more than a year of investigating, the Mounties have concluded that it's not the local group that planned the attack. John Brewer believes it was orchestrated and largely executed by outside forces. Are you suggesting that the people who are involved, the suspects that you have in the worksite attack, came and infiltrated the group, that's the word you just used, and had some sort of attachment to the anarchist movement, such as it is in Canada?
Yeah, I think it's safe to say whether they are directly part of the anarchist movement or believe in it or use their tactics, absolutely.
No one has claimed responsibility for the worksite attack, but an anonymous post on an anarchist website did take credit for the arson. The same website where credit was taken for damage to drilling equipment at a Calgary storage yard. The latest posting, a claim of sabotage, that before they were buried, some pipes had tiny holes drilled into them. Far from infiltrating the local protest group, anarchists were actually invited.
Hi, I'm Rob.
The chief took us to meet Molly Wickham.
Which do you prefer, Molly or Slato? Okay.
The local protest leader, who goes by Slato, has called for anarchists to join the cause.
We are calling on you, our allies, other Indigenous nations, labor unions, anarchist groups.
You called for people from that movement to be a part of this movement.
Oh yeah, we have a lot of people that we've worked with in the past that are amazing, great human beings.
But may have participated in that. So do you feel some responsibility for that then, if you called for them to come here?
Absolutely not.
Who do you think is responsible for that attack?
I don't have an idea.
Do you understand why I might find that hard to believe?
Yes,
okay.
I do.
Were you a
because
part
we've
of it?
been here, absolutely not.
And why wouldn't you have a sense of who would be behind that? They were clearly doing it in solidarity with
Yeah,
the cause.
I think that there's a lot of resistance to this project that is outside of ourselves.
So who are the outsiders? Police aren't saying who their suspects are, and we don't know. We did pull the court documents on every arrest made in the conflict zone, and the details are revealing. About 70% of the people taken into custody were not from this area. Some were from other parts in BC, others other provinces, and even the US. And more than one of them had ties to the anarchist movement.
Our nation was hijacked. Our nation's name was hijacked. They've taken our name and put it in a bad spotlight all across Canada.
Bonnie George works for Coastal GasLink. She's also Wetsuweten and believes the violence has done lasting damage to her people, saying many protesters feel the same and have left the movement.
The community members were just disgusted by what happened.
We've got 540 kilometers of pipe already in the ground on the project. So this is
Coastal GasLink says the pipeline is now 85% complete. But police believe as long as work on the pipeline continues, the threat of violence here remains. The tunneling under the pure water of Wetsuweten should be finished by June. Where the fight to protect the river goes then is far less clear.
So, Rob, the references to this anarchist movement in your story, in a sense, is movement not a bit of a misnomer here?
Yeah, it really is. Yeah, I mean, this, by their very nature, this isn't a group of people who join an organization per se, Adrian. It's really a collection of individuals who adhere to and then act on an ideology. Police say that number is very small in Canada. We've been in contact with one such person, originally from Ottawa, now lives in Mexico, where he publishes an anarchist newsletter. This is a guy with a history in Quebec, the States, and BC, was arrested in Wet'suwet'en territory for assault on a police officer with a weapon. That charge stayed. He has yet to answer our direct questions about that worksite attack, Adrian.
Just briefly, it sounds like work on the pipeline is actually pretty advanced. Any sense of when it will be completed?
Company's hoping within the calendar year. This is a project that's faced lots of delays and is way over budget, more than 2 times over the original estimate. Now sits at a cost of $14 billion, Adrian.
All right, Rob Brown in Calgary, thank you.
You bet.
So, for those of you who don't know, the history behind Wetsuweten, and how this all started. I'll give you a brief kind of a rundown on the timeline here. So in 1997, there was something called the Delgamuc Supreme Court case. This is when the traditional hereditary chiefs of Wet'suwet'en and Gitxsan went to the Supreme Court of Canada. So you got to understand the Supreme Court of Canada is a representative of a colonial government. And so in that particular case, the Supreme Court of Canada had acknowledged and noted that the hereditary chiefs are the ones who are recognized as the controlling authorities of the land in question. So all the Wet'suwet'en and Gitxsan territories belong to those hereditary chiefs. They're the ones who maintain control and authority over those lands. That was from the colonial perspective in 1997. So jump ahead 10 years. 2007, in January, an interest in use study was proposed. And at that point, what that means is what they're looking at the land as what can we do and how can we use this land. So they're looking at it as a commodity. The Wet'suwet'en have expressed opposition to any pipelines on this land from day one. So whatever happens or is being proposed to happen on these lands needs to be approved by and in consultation with the hereditary traditional chiefs. Okay, so this is not to be confused with an elected chief and council, because those are two different, completely different things. An elected chief and council is part of the colonial system, so which are not recognized by the traditional members of any nation. So in 2008, all the Wet'suwet'en clans unanimously vote and opt out of being involved with any BC treaty process, trying to assert their rights and title to ancient jurisdiction belonging to them. Now, that title and jurisdiction was again already recognized and acknowledged by the Supreme Court in the Delgamuc Supreme Court case back in 1997. Corporations are still pushing. So, April 2009, checkpoints are established on the Wet'suwet'en entrance on the Unist'ot'en territory. Then in 2011, the Unist'ot'en supports their grassroots neighbor, the Gitxsan Nation, who blocked entry to their treaty office to contest the deal with Enbridge, because again, the traditional leaders want nothing to do with oil. And Enbridge is still trying to push to get their pipelines into our territory, into the Wet'suwet'en and Gitxsan territory. So now, as part of the conflicts continue, the hereditary chiefs and community members recognized that there was a need for them to kind of really embrace their tradition. And because of the conflicts, they needed a way of healing. So in June of 2015, they began construction on a healing center. So I'm going to show you the healing center that they did, that they were starting at the time. The healing center again was to help them kind of ground in their tradition and their ceremony. So this is on the Unist'ot'en territory, and it's called the Unist'ot'en Healing Center. Now, this is happening in 2015. So let me get my face off the screen here for a moment and let you see the healing center.
decided to build this healing center to bring our own people out here and bring healing to them spiritually, mentally, physically, and use this space to make our people strong. Like the residential schools were used to take the Indian out of the child. We want to use this facility to put the Indian back in our children, meaning our culture. If our people have our culture, they'll be strong and they'll be able to stand on their own 2 feet, and we'll have a strong nation to learn to take care of ourselves and take care of our resources, take care of the land. If we take care of our land, then the land will take care of us.
It's an opportunity for us to use our values and our teachings and our conceptions of wellness and how to achieve that to support our community members. And the Western system does an inadequate job. We're overrepresented as Indigenous people, as children, as adults, in the correctional systems with mental health disorders, with higher rates of suicidal ideation and behavior. We're at risk because of those legacies of colonization and that disconnect from who we are as Indigenous people. I think one of the most powerful things about the potential with this center is that we can design the programming from an Indigenous perspective on what wellness is. We don't have many spaces that are our own for healing as Indigenous people. There's a lot of incentives for our communities to look at these industry partnerships for things like LNG or tar sands. It comes at a huge cost, and it's a cultural cost. It's an identity cost, essentially. It's asking communities who are at a disadvantage, really, to sign on for short-term opportunities to feed their children without allowing them to consider the impacts on their grandchildren and the next generations to really have those opportunities to embrace their identity and who they are, because so much of that for us is based on our land and our connection to the land and all the teachings. In short, I would see those projects, especially the ones proposed to run through this territory, as a threat to us reclaiming and self-determining our own health and wellness.
So, as you can see at this point, the oil companies and corporations are still trying to push their way onto the territory, and this was in June of 2015. And as they were saying in there, is our teachings always tell us to consider the next generations, and ultimately we should be thinking of the next 7 generations. Is the teachings that in my area that we've been given, is always think of the next 7 generations and how what we do today is going to impact them, because what we leave them is going to have them either be sustainable or spend the next 7 generations after that repairing what we've done. And so we always want to try to keep that in mind with any decisions that we're making. And unfortunately, because of the underfunding that the colonial government has given to the Indigenous people in any of their social services, such as childcare and etc., um, there are people who are amongst our nations that would fall in favor of the oil pipelines on a short-sighted concept of we can still get we can get money, we can feed our children, we can uh, move forward with personal needs. And it's I mean it's understandable to a certain point on a short-sighted kind of perspective, but again, if we're thinking 7 generations ahead, then it's not a good idea. And so we see that the Wetsuweten and the Gitxsan people and the Unistoten people still fight to protect this land. And what they want to do now is they want to give their perspective on what has been happening up until that. So in November of 2020, right around the time that there was one of the invasions by the RCMP onto the Wet'suwet'en land, they released a film, a documentary film called Invasion. Now, this film is not very long. It's about 18 minutes long. So I'm going to show you that documentary so you can see the perspective from the indigenous side of things, rather than the slanted, censored mainstream media perspective you get when you're watching the news. So again, I'm going to disappear here and we'll get this started. And this is called Invasion.
Some of you guys always come and interrupt our prayers or eating. And it's good to time it.
Okay, good morning.
What's up?
We have a complaint that there was a box on the bridge.
I didn't see no box.
Okay, it's the box right there that was painted black. Okay, and the young girl at 8:30 came this morning and removed it.
She just said it had kindling in there. Maybe somebody forgot it when we were doing ceremony last night.
Okay, because we got complaints that there was lots of activity on the bridge last night.
Ceremony. Look at the flags. We did a water ceremony because they're trying to destroy our water. I'm just getting annoyed of their bullshit tactics. They're trying to make us look bad and send you guys all the time. And every time they do stuff to us, it takes you guys 2 hours to get here.
So you're blessing the water last night on the bridge, or?
We're doing prayers for the water because it's in danger right now because of this BS that's happening right now. It's not just this. They destroyed our traps, destroyed our trap line. Conservation wouldn't come till they already cleared. All of this adds up. And you got to understand our frustration. We've been here since time immemorial before anybody came to these lands, and your law can bend the rules to let somebody come in and destroy our land. And you get you guys to help them. If it was your house, you'd feel the same if the same vandals keep coming and wrecking your shit and nobody's doing anything. I was here 10 years and it took a long time to put these stuff up. They're here 1 week and they want to destroy it all. Nowhere in the injunction does it tell them they can frickin' ruin my stuff. I'm pissed. What's in Kwa? What's in Kwa? Unistoten Hapayen Haonten Unistoten
Can you clap one time in front of your face?
Thinking of what are some of the challenges and also positive things that have come out of the last year?
Well, in the last year, it's been busy. Everybody needs to stand up, not just Indigenous people. Everybody needs to stand up to the political powers that be, that they need to change. and quit making legislation and policies to make us look like criminals when we're just trying to protect what is ours. It's not just this little courthouse. The whole world is watching what Canada is doing, what the province of BC is doing. They haven't done their job. They're skirting the responsibility over to industry. And I know I'm doing the right thing.
Good to see some more Wetsuweten.
Yeah.
That were funding.
There you go.
Yes. And they were building all of it.
Oh boy. It's sad.
There's some bannock there and some moose heart and chili on the stove.
Hey, I didn't even know you were
There's a plate if you like. Hurry. 2S+.
I'm sorry, I don't understand.
Skidamden Bianca.
My name is Vic, and I'm with the Coastal GasLink project. And the reason for Mr. Couture to be here is to post the injunction that was granted by the BC Supreme Court to allow us access to do the work.
Canadian courts do not have any jurisdiction on Wet'suwet'en territories. The Wet'suwet'en hereditary chiefs have full jurisdiction. We have for thousands of years, since time immemorial. We have never ceded or surrendered any of that jurisdiction. So I am not here to argue that point with you.
So we're going to post the injunction. You're not going to allow us through to get to the bridge with what access we have or what...
I have nothing stopping you from accessing the bridge. On the other side of the bridge is a different territory. This is Skidamden territory. You're trespassing on Wet'suwet'en land! You continue to remove us forcibly from our lands with your rifles, with your semi-automatic weapons. Nothing has changed in 150 years.
Also keeping our eyes on the planned demonstrations across the country, all in support of anti-pipeline protesters in British Columbia. 14 people were arrested at the protest site late yesterday.
That sparked a stand of solidarity across the countries. Rallies were staged in dozens of cities, even some in the U.S., in support of the anti-pipeline protesters. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau could face heat over the issue tonight. He's in Kamloops, BC, hosting a town hall.
Trudeau has made improved relations with Indigenous people a core priority of his government.
You in the striped scarf. Yes.
Hello, my name is Tilly. I come from the Statium Nation. I want to ask you, what are you going to do to stop oppressing and holding our people under your colonization? When are you going to give us our rights back? When are you going to start giving a shit about who we are as people and not seeing us just for our land?
I believe that the conflict that you're making it into out west, with helicopters flying overhead and paramilitaries showing up with assault rifles, is appalling. And so I'm more or less here to tell you that that's shameful.
What you did to the Unistoten, that's a national disgrace. January 7th was a national disgrace of Canada.
It's inspiring to see the support worldwide that we have, and it's not just our Indigenous people that are standing up, it's people all around the world are concerned about the environment and concerned because they know it impacts them no matter where they live. So yeah, with that injunction and such low numbers out here, all of the Wet'suwet'en chiefs, because of what happened at 44, were afraid for us that were still up here at the camp, and they didn't want any of us to get hurt. So out of fear, they made their decision to get us to stand back, and we made a decision that it was too demoralizing, that we weren't going to take down those gates. If they wanted them down, they had to do it.
This is my people's land way before the settlers came here. And you think you have a right to come on our land and destroy it? It's not right. My people have history here. The partners that have signed, they have no history here. And I hope you can go home and sleep tonight.
We started coming back here in 2009 when we wanted to put a cabin here and realized that we safely could drink this water, so this became our prime point on where we wanted to spend more of our time. This is the proposed corridor for multiple pipelines, and we decided to move out here because we realized we couldn't protect our territories from afar. We're 2 hours away, and because they kept on trying to come in.
Who are you?
My name is Rod.
Where are you from?
I'm with Chevron, representing the Pacific Trail Pipeline Project. We're here today because we would like to do work on the territory, and we're requesting access to the territory here today so that Wet'suwet'en people can work and see the benefits from our project.
We've already said no to these projects and that no pipelines will come on our territory, and we only have 2 territories left out of all our territories because of other people occupying our lands and agriculture, municipalities. All we have left is 2 areas, and this is one of them. We hunt, we fish, we trap. This is our critical infrastructure.
So what you're telling us is that you will not allow us access onto the territory. We understand that. We thank you for your time here today. We brought you an offering. We left some water, some tobacco.
No thanks. We've got clean water right there. That's what we drink, and that's pollution, the plastic that adds to the landfill.
The 5th meeting of the 18th session of the Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues is called to order.
I am Frida Hewson of the Unist'ot'en Wet'suwet'en people of Canada. I am here today to express concerns for human rights violations happening to my people. This year, a pipeline company forced a court injunction on us, and if we stop them from entering our territory because they don't have consent, we face arrests. We have not been able to hunt or gather our traditional foods. The company has security and police force for keeping us from exercising our Indigenous rights. Elders, women, and healing center clients have been threatened with arrest for accessing our own territory. The pipeline company is violating Wet'suwet'en law, trespassing on our territory and starting to destroy the land. They have already destroyed the heritage site. After bulldozing part of the forest, we searched through the piles of dirt for evidence of my people. We found artifacts. The archaeology branch of the government and police assistants came in and took the artifacts and then released news bulletins claiming the artifacts were not from their original place. They are trying to erase us from our own land. All these acts that continue are the acts of genocide. I am here today to make the UN aware of a continuous genocide happening in Canada and to demand that our Indigenous rights and laws are respected.
We're wondering why our own people weren't standing up beside us, and the more and more we realize that a lot of my family, the ones that are standing up, all the females in my family, we've done a lot of healings in our lives. We've gone through the same trauma as everybody else on our reservations. So that's the reason why we're able to stand up and stand up against what we know is wrong. So that's why we identified that other people aren't able to stand up because they're still stuck in their trauma and oppression and everything that comes with being oppressed and living in a system that discriminates against you. So when my niece started going to school for clinical psychology, her long-term vision was to see a healing center on the land so that we can start healing our people. It took us 4 years to build the 3 phases of our healing center, which has a commercial kitchen, dining hall was built in the first phase, and then a rec room upstairs and food storage. And then the second phase included a boardroom, laundry room, an office, and 2 counseling spaces, and the 3rd floor was art room / workshop room. So that was the 2nd phase that was put in, and then the 3rd phase was sleeping quarters. So this is the 4th year of work camp, and it's pretty much done with just small minor things. And then now the long-term goal is to add more cabins, because for the healing center, we require a whole territory, all of Talbot's-Qua, to make this program successful. This is a new cabin being constructed by one of another significant site for our people. And this is the 2nd one we're building to reoccupy another part of the territory. Beautiful scenery, tons and tons of medicine in this area. My dad always told me that the only way we're not going to lose all our traditional territories, we have to reoccupy them. It's pretty much what settler people have done. They occupied our territories, and now they call those municipalities and act like they own it, even though it's still Wet'suwet'en lands. But he said we needed to reoccupy and behave like we own it, because we do own it. We're behaving like we own these lands, and we don't need nobody's permission to put up our cabins, and we don't need nobody's permission to be here. We only go by our own Wet'suwet'en laws.
What do you think is going to happen in the future in this land?
The future I see is more and more of our people living in cabins all over this territory, more of our people getting thoroughly immersed in their culture, becoming independent and harvesting their own food, their own medicine, so they can take care of themselves and their families. More and more other clans doing the same of what we're doing on their territories. The future I see is there will be no pipelines through here. The future I see, there will be no man camp here.
What are you afraid of?
That's a trick question, because I don't fear anything.
So that was Invasion. That film was done in 2020, and to give the perspective from the indigenous side of things. Leaders felt corporations pushing through the proposed use of such a pipeline building on traditional lands, even despite their opposition to them. Corporations seem to be under the protection of the RCMP. And for those of you who don't know, or aren't from Canada, the RCMP is the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. They're the federal law enforcement that was created in 1873. They're responsible for the execution of Métis leader Louis Riel in 1885 due to his resistance to colonial activities. They are also appointed as truancy officers, responsible for taking Indigenous children away from their families and communities and putting them in residential schools, and which were, of course, largely controlled and managed by the church and funded by the colonial government. And so, as such, there's never really been a great relationship between the RCMP and Indigenous peoples, and their violence continues. In November of 2021, the RCMP invade Wetsuweten territory and they violently removed land defenders again. So, which was about, I think, their third time invading the land and forcibly removing um, the members, indigenous peoples from the land. Now, it seems like if you Google for information regarding this conflict, a lot of the news coverage ended for the most part around 2020, just before that last invasion. And there's low coverage now as media tries to assist in kind of burying the details of updates on this. So much of what you need to do to find updates is by going directly to the participants or going to the community's sites or using alternative news resources like APTN or Democracy Now. And so now the latest actions taken for the Indigenous leaders was to attend the RBC, what they call the Royal Bank of Canada's AGM. So I'm going to get to that in a moment, but just before I do that, I want to show you um, an article. Hey, Faustian Organ, y'all go for being here. Welcome in. Anyone who doesn't know Faustian, uh, click that link and give her a quick follow while we prep for this next clip. And so what we are doing is I'm going to show you a clip because, as I said, the violence and the aggression that the RCMP have been putting on the indigenous people has not changed. And so I'm going to show you a clip that shows you interviews with two of the people who were there to help the Wet'suwet'en protect their land. One of them is Skylar Williams, who's also instrumental in organizing the stand at the Six Nations of Grand River in Caledonia. Um, and his partner, Layla Black. Layla Black is a filmmaker and an indigenous filmmaker who's done some documentaries as well. Um, One specifically called Blood and Water, which is about the connection her family uses with healing through their water and kind of healing the effects of the intergenerational trauma they experience through the residential school system. And excuse me, I've shown that documentary on stream a couple of times, um, and I'm sure that I'll show it again sometime in the future. But if you ever get a chance to see that, it's a great one. But Layla Black, Skylar Williams, and Logan Stats are three Mohawk people from the Six Nations of Grand River, and they all went out to the Wet'suwet'en to help defend the land. And as such, they were there during one of the invasions, and the guys were um, roughed up, and and this is going to be a bit of an interview as to what they experienced. And so I wanted you to be able to see um, exactly from the activist point of view um, how they see reconciliation. In fact, that's what this is called. It's called reconciliation at gunpoint. So I'm going to, again, get my face off the screen here so you can see this. This isn't very long. It's just a short interview with the two of them, but I think that it's impactful and it was well filmed. So let me get my face off the screen again, and I'll show you this one.
Before we went to bed that night, we had a pretty good idea that the day was coming.
I could hear helicopters flying around all morning, and you knew that it was coming.
Word come down quite early that there was a lot of mobilization happening.
You could see lineups of police buses, and I remember seeing the military greens coming up the sides. And they had very scary guns, and these dogs.
The dogs were just always like pulling at the leashes and barking and snarling.
And I remember the RCMP marching towards us in formation. I couldn't really make out what they were saying, but they were chanting something together, and then they all went, like that. And I just felt like, wow, they are ready to attack.
It's almost laughable, the level of expense the state is willing to go through in order to, inflict that bit of fear and intimidation on our people. To see that level of police force used on, 8 people standing on a bridge was extreme, to say the least.
When you see a wall of fear, intimidation, violence marching towards you and the people that you love, there's this moment where you make a decision. Am I going to stand up, or am I going to, go run and hide?
Uncle Lawrence standing there with his wife, like those are beautiful moments of resistance. Like, how can you not love that? How can you not respect that? I don't even know what it is, the will, I guess, to stand there against such a wall of hate and oppression and racism.
They just broke right through us, and we just wrapped around Auntie Janet, this elder, and we just all did this big bear hug and started to sing. And we sang the Mohawk Water Song by Bear Fox.
You hear from all the fucking governments across the country talking about, the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People, or missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls, or truth and reconciliation calls to action. Like, you hear all this happy Indian rhetoric from all these politicians and all the things that we're going to do to make these big changes, and and then you see exactly in those moments just how serious they are about reconciliation.
And it seemed pleasurable to them. They went right after the men first, my brother and Skylar.
And me and Logan just held on to each other. We get beat up for 30 seconds and slammed to the ground with cops on top of us.
Seeing my brother ripped off and grabbed by his braids, them just jumping on top of him, slamming him down, and his legs kind of bent back in a weird shape, and he's yelling, "I can't breathe, I can't breathe."
The cop is kneeing me in the ribs, and finally got my hands out and arrested me and put me in cuffs.
When I was finally arrested, it still sits with me. So he put me in the back of his car, my arms behind my back shaking, and this police officer winks at me. And it continued, that feeling of not being valued or respected throughout jail, throughout the court system.
I expect, I guess, to be treated a bit different. I've, stood on many a front line and pushed back as hard as I could in my life. But for Logan and Layla, who'd never, they've never been arrested for anything.
And then when we're transported to court, it's a day that I'll never forget. My first ever appearance in court. Stripped down to my underwear, my long johns, very exposed, and shackled by my ankles, shackled by my wrists.
I remember getting up to go to court that morning. I reached for my clothes, and the guy said, no, just your boots. I said, I'm not going to court in my underwear. And he's like, your stuff's gonna go with you, it'll be ready for you when you get there.
So then when we were taken to the court, there were these SUV transport trucks. And in the back hatch, it was all metal, everything was metal. They were like these 2 dog cages, looked like dog cages.
You know, the large kind of like 3 feet deep, 3 feet tall and 2 feet wide dog cages wrapped in plexiglass and kind of like bolted and well secured. I got to the back and he said, all right, hop on in. And I said, no, fuck that, I ain't going in a fucking dog cage. He said, well, there's 15 other people behind you. And the judge said they only got an hour for court. So if you want to hold everybody up, you're more than welcome to it. And so I bit my tongue. And I stepped up to the bumper of this SUV and shimmied my way into the back of this little dog crate in the back of this SUV.
That feeling of that hatch closing and just being in darkness. And again, you don't know where you're going. You're just going wherever you're told. And there's this sense of control and dominance. You know, it's just like this degrading feeling of humiliation.
That was a hard 10-minute ride. We got taken up to the courtroom. I stopped and I'm like, well, where's my bag? I'd like to put my clothes on. I'm not going to court in my underwear. Like, give me my pants. And the one officer said, yeah, we'll get you your stuff when you're ready for it.
It was only my brother and Skylar and myself that were in these ankle shackles.
Extra level of degradation that they wanted to push on the 3 Mohawks that were dragged in front of that courtroom that day.
And the other girls that were in the room with me they weren't Indigenous. Some of them didn't even have handcuffs on.
As you're walking through all of these doors and trying not to trip over the chain that's between your ankles, looking down, all you seen was that the floor changed from concrete to this red carpet.
And I just remember seeing a wall of faces, community members, law enforcement, officials, just people I didn't know, and I just felt like such a criminal. I know that what I'm doing is right, but I feel like a criminal. It was a hard feeling to explain. Like you were less than.
They walked us across the front of the courtroom in our shackles and underwear, and it took me a second to try and put together just how wrong everything was. People in the movement, we always talk about like the crown representing, the state and violence and, supporting the corporations. But like when it's a civil arrest, a lawyer arguing for your detainment, a person arguing against your bail and setting conditions isn't the crown, it's the lawyer for CGL. And the judge is the Superior Court judge that granted the injunction, who is pissed off that we violated her injunction in the first place.
You get a taste of how Indigenous people have felt criminalized and how they do feel criminalized in that system. Just a taste. And it was enough for me to realize that something is very wrong.
It is such a commonplace across every single Indigenous movement that you see this bit of paper that come from these civil courts that are being utilized as tools of that oppression, of that dispossession of Indigenous people across the country. And you see people be beaten, you see people dragged from their lands, you see like attack dogs at the ready and AR-15s with their finger on the trigger, and this is fucking 2021. Like, this isn't fucking 1921.
As you come home, things are different. It affects you. We were at a rally and I saw like police cherries behind us. And I just remember this, I felt like I couldn't move. And in that moment, I was like, this is exactly what they had intended. For me to see a police officer and be triggered by fear. That was intentional.
And you know what? It's a fucking 500-year-old song and dance now, and I think most of our communities are onto it and we know what it is.
I know that a lot of our friends there are dealing with trauma. That it's really hard to continue to stand up when you have been terrorized in that way. But that's what makes us warriors. That's what makes us different.
After being 100 kilometers from anything that looks like concrete and asphalt, it's a bit of an adjustment to come back I mean, my river at home, like, we don't let our kids swim in it, let alone eat anything out of it or drink it. You're more likely to catch a shopping cart from No Frills or a 1978 BMX bike than a salmon out of our river.
You know, there's many of us that never have and maybe never will drink from a clean river. I've been to many different reserves and talked to them about their water issues, their boil water advisories, the fight for water that is going on all across Turtle Island. And I've seen rivers poisoned. I've seen rivers filled with dead salmon. I've seen people shed real tears for the destruction of their lands that they're connected to. This is why it's not just about the Wet'suwet'en people. It's about all of us, because water is life for all of us.
And so whatever we can do to support, whatever we can do to amplify, whether that's boots on the ground, shoulder to shoulder, you know what, these injunctions are just bits of paper. If they want to jail us, jail me for standing up for that, and they want to sick the attack dogs and AR-15s on us, like they're more than welcome to do that, but it isn't going to stop us.
This connection that we have to the land around us, the land that we've lived on, our territories, it is real. And we know what that feels like as Haudenosaunee. We feel that connection because it's not just nature. We are in a relationship with that land. It knows us and we know it.
Because, you know, like we always talk about this connection that we have to each other and this connection that we have to the land and the water. And you know what? That means something for us. And so whatever that takes to stand with our brothers and sisters on the West Coast, like, we're going to be there 100%.
So that was Skylar Williams and Layla Black, who are both from the Six Nations of Grand River in Ontario, not far from where I live, and talking about their experience as they tried to stand up for the Wet'suwet'en people as well. So the very beginning of the stream, I had mentioned that the reason I was bringing this up is the timing in that first news clip that I showed, and how it kind of coincides with the same day as the RGM AGM, RBC AGM. So RBC being the Royal Bank of Canada annual general meeting took place last week. Now, anybody who was here a couple of weeks ago would have seen Chief Mamax. I joined in on a Zoom meeting where Chief Mamax was discussing how people could support. One of the things he said was to come out to the annual general meeting. You won't be able to get in because it's only certain people who are allowed to actually get in. But the chiefs, as representatives of the Wet'suwet'en government, were invited to be there, and their spokespeople. Now, I have two short clips here. One is going to show you um, a gathering prior to the AGM meeting. The other one is going to show you a clip of the elders trying to get into the meeting. And just to kind of show you the ongoing manipulation that continues even to this day, as we try to, this government is trying to say that their relationship with Indigenous peoples on Turtle Island is their priority, and at the same time we have the Royal Bank of Canada who is saying that they have a focus on doing things that are environmentally conscious or conscientious. Um, but this is when you see these two clips, this will kind of give you a better idea of what they're actually talking about. So I'm gonna get myself off the screen here again, and this is the gathering of protesters outside, talking just before the annual general meeting.
Today is Fossil Fuels Day, so it's a coordinated day of action across the country to draw attention to RBC's continual funding of fossil fuel expansion projects in Canada. RBC is the #1 funder of fossil fuels in Canada and #5 in the world.
I came out here to let RBC know that we don't agree with what they're doing, and we want to make it clear if nobody shows up, they think it's okay.
We're demanding that RBC divest from the Coastal GasLink pipeline and reinvest in clean energy, invest the money in clean energy, stop violating Indigenous rights, and giving free, prior, informed consent to Indigenous people for any projects that they're doing.
If we can't get it, shut it down. If we
Indigenous leaders are in Saskatoon today to make their voice heard at RBC's annual general meeting, but that didn't happen, at least for some.
Not doing this. You need to step
back. Do
not
not touch me.
You're
Do not touch me, please.
You need to back up.
Do not touch me.
Many say they are not being let into the shareholder meeting, even though they plan to present at it. This is part of a significant push for businesses to incorporate free, prior, and informed consent of Indigenous peoples into their business policies. This is a specific right that is recognized in the United Nations Declarations on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. Grand Chief Stuart Phillip is the president of the Union of British Columbia Indian Chiefs. He attended the meeting and he joins me now. Grand Chief, welcome back to the show.
Good afternoon.
Well, what's your message to banks and businesses that want to capitalize on these opportunities for things like critical minerals and LNG when it comes to this principle of free, prior, and informed consent?
Yes.
Sorry, Grand Chief, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, well, I'm wondering, what is your message to the banks? You were there today. Well, what's your message to them on this principle of free, prior, and informed consent?
Well, we attended the RBC AGM with the shareholders. There was a very large Indigenous delegation, people from all parts of the country as far away as Louisiana, and we put forward 8 proposals. Number 2 was in regard to free, prior, and informed consent, and we were attempting to convince RBC to incorporate it into their business practices and for it to be an active part of their decision making. There was a proposal and a resolution brought forward. We did gain 28% support for that particular proposal, which represents $25 billion in shareholder interest. So that in itself is progress. We are going to continue our campaign to have RBC commit to acting on the incorporation of free, prior, and informed consent and the UN Declaration within itself and what that represents. Unfortunately, RBC had a heavy presence of security, rather large men in suits, and they immediately divided us up. There was 2 of us, including myself, that made it into the actual AGM,
right.
And the other few dozen were herded off into a room without any audio or anything of that nature. So that was a bit of a disappointment as well as a lost opportunity on the part of RBC to look towards relationship building with Indigenous peoples.
I wonder if I could just interject there. I want to get your reaction to what happened there. But for the people watching at home, why RBC? Why are you targeting them specifically on this, to bring this issue to their shareholders meeting and banks more broadly? Why was RBC the focus today?
RBC was the focus because they're number 1. RBC is one of the leading banking organizations globally as well as within North America. And it only makes sense for us to look toward the RBC to be the first to incorporate free, prior, and informed consent into their active banking business and thereby influence other banking interests to do the same.
So what would that look like, sir, if they incorporated that into their practices? Realistically, how would that change what the bank does and how it functions?
Well, the short answer is that decision-making wouldn't simply be based on corporate profit. It would also be based on environmental concerns and interests, climate change, for example, and the catastrophic impacts. All of those things would have to be taken into consideration when decisions are made about large-scale oil and gas projects and the destructive impacts of fracking, for example, and other destructive practices. It wouldn't just be a bottom-line decision.
Right. So you like them to not finance or financially support projects and ventures that didn't already have free, prior, and informed consent? Is that sort of the end goal here?
Yes.
Yeah,
yes,
okay.
yes.
So you want them to factor that in. So if a company wants to develop something like an LNG plant or a critical mineral mine, you want the banks to make that a condition of a financing conversation, essentially.
Well, as well as environmental interests and concerns.
So the fact that not everybody could get in and they were brought by security to a room where they couldn't hear and see what was going on, you got 28%, I think it was, you said, of the vote in support, but what message does that exclusion send to you about how open RBC in particular is to having this conversation?
Well, I think RBC is incredibly paranoid. Again, going back to the number of security people they had there, and I think they assumed there was going to be some type of disruption or something along those lines, which of course never happened. You know, it's disappointing. It gives expression to the racist notions of RBC when it comes to Indigenous peoples.
So it was RBC today. Do you go back at RBC again next? Do you target another bank next? What's next in your efforts to get this principle adopted?
It's a campaign. We do both. We continue with our efforts with RBC as well as other major banks until free, prior, and informed consent becomes institutionalized in the banking and investment community. The UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples means that there has to be that transformative change, not only within government, but also within institutions such as banking, the justice system, the medical system, education, and so on and so forth. It's a very, very long journey we have in front of us, but we are going to continue. The world will only work if Indigenous peoples and our values and our laws are combined with other laws that simply seek the bottom line profit.
Well, thank you very much, sir. Grand Chief Stuart Phillip, thank you so much for joining me tonight.
Thank you.
So that's kind of the gist of where we're at now. Is that the latest thing was the trying to get in and have um, a discussion at the RBC annual general meeting. So ultimately, I guess, what is it that needs to happen now? So first of all, we need to actually be able to have those open discussions. Have discussions to talk about what is and what is not permitted to happen on Indigenous traditional lands. We need to ensure people who actually have authority on these decisions are consulted. So in Wetsuweten's territory, for example, it's the hereditary chiefs that have complete authority and decision making over those lands, as was decided back in 1997 when they had the first court case, which was called the Delgamuc Supreme Court case, and that was decided in 1997 by the Canadian Supreme Court, which again is a representative of the colonial government, right? They have acknowledged and recognized that the hereditary chiefs of the Wet'suwet'en and Gitxsan territories and the Unistoten have the authority over those lands and what they should be doing. So those are the people that need to be consulted because those are the ones that make the decisions for the communities, right? So that has to be one of those things that happens. We need education and awareness to be more accessible to everyone. And this includes the general public because what the general public basically gets as far as knowledge and understanding is on the current mainstream media outlets, which is again slanted and isn't really the full story. We need to end militarized law enforcement invading traditional lands and creating confrontations and perpetuating violence against defenders. We need to end law enforcement spewing bogus charges on these defenders in order to protect corporate interests, and in which in turn kind of limits the mainstream media access to the full brunt of what is happening on the lands. So the mainstream media can cover a story, but if they don't have the complete story, then they're not giving they're not presenting a complete argument to the public. Um, so we need to banks to stop funding projects that are not um, approved by the indigenous communities. So when indigenous communities say no to pipelines or to whatever uh, oil projects there might be, then then that should be the end of it. There should be no let's keep funding them and funding them and funding them until they can financially fight their way through the court system and through whatever other means that they can use to get their project done and then get that investment returned back to them. So I will try to continue to keep updates on the Wet'suwet'en issue. So you can keep an eye on this channel. I'll get more updates, and I'll be reaching out to some of the activists and people who are involved in that story. So now, on to the second thing that we are going to talk about today. I wanted to again give a bit of a warning because the next subject that we're going to discuss can be a little bit triggering, particularly for our red brothers and sisters and two spirits, because this is going to cover what's happening in Winnipeg. For those of you who don't know, um, I had Cambria Harris on the stream back at the first week of February. And Cambria Harris is the daughter Morgan Harris, who is one of four women who were. You can see the interview with on that clip if you decide you want to see her story as she said it here um, back in February. But Cambria Harris's mother is one of four women who were murdered by a serial killer in Winnipeg. Now, as you know, there are three women that are believed to be in landfills in Winnipeg. Um, Morgan Harris, which is Cambria's mother, Mercedes Myron, and Buffalo Woman. Yet the local government is not searching for them. Part of the remains of Rebecca Contois were found in the landfill as well. And then the rest of her body parts were found in different parts of Winnipeg. So obviously, when Rebecca was actually dismembered by the killer, and different parts of her body were put in different places. Um, so, which is ultimately a very gruesome way to be treated, and with such crass disrespect. It is just, it's crazy um, that, that we have to really fight so hard to get these landfills searched. So, so the other thing now is, aside from those three other women, um, believed to still be in one of those two different Winnipeg landfills, um, that the search hasn't happened yet. In the midst of that stand up, uh, activists have put a camp out in front of Brady landfill to prevent people from putting more garbage and dumping more garbage in the landfill on top of our sisters. Now, last Monday, it was reported that a 33-year-old Indigenous woman named Linda Beardy was found in that Brady landfill by workers. They weren't even looking for her. And the police had a press conference stating it was a suspicious death, only to come back a couple of days later and say it was not a suspicious death, um, sending the Beardy family into this whole emotional roller coaster of feelings and trauma. So here's the thing, they say it was suspicious death based on the condition of the body. So in their investigation, what they decided was to search video cameras and footage that's around there, talk to witnesses and people that are around the area of about about her. They're saying that there's footage of Linda climbing in to the garbage bin in Winnipeg. Now they know that there was some activity going on inside the garbage bin. Obviously, they couldn't see it. Cameras can't obviously see through the metal. But that garbage bin then went to the landfill, got dumped, and now they're saying, well, no longer is it suspicious because even though the transfer from garbage to truck to landfill isn't what killed her, her death is still not suspicious. So how does that even make sense? Um, so it to me it doesn't. And so I'm going to go over a couple of things here. I'm going to show you a couple of clips. I'm going to show you the first press release that the police reported when they reported it. Then I'm going to show you the press release after they decided all of a sudden it's no longer suspicious. And I'm going to show you a little clip of the family talking about how they feel the police handled the whole situation out there. And then lastly, there's a little segment that uh, with Cambria Harris in it that was done that just broadcast last week as well. That I want to show you as a follow up and her kind of discussing her perception of what's happening with the missing and murdered Indigenous women. Nabil Sigoli, welcome in. Nice to see you here. If anybody likes my stream, I'm sure that you'll probably find Nabil to be an interesting stream to watch as well. So again, if you feel like you're being triggered, take care of your mental health. Always think of that. And there are always resources as well for anybody who feels like this is pretty heavy and I need to talk to someone about it. There's some resources there, and if there's nothing there locally, then definitely check your local area because I know that there are sometimes just regional sources that people can use to get some help with. But and if you need to take a minute to kind of get away from this for a little bit, I completely understand because I know that again because of how triggering this content can be. So let me get my face off the screen here then, and I'm going to start by showing the very first press release.
A Winnipeg Police Service news conference started with this warning. Before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge that there are details that may be disturbing to members of the public, particularly those directly impacted by matters involving missing and murdered Indigenous women, girls, Two-Spirit, and gender-diverse people.
And then, the startling news, another woman has been found dead at the Brady Road landfill.
Yesterday at approximately 3 p.m., the Winnipeg Police Service was notified by staff at the Brady landfill site that a deceased person was located in an active area of the facility.
The woman has been identified as 33-year-old Linda Mary Beardy of Winnipeg and originally from the Lake St. Martin area. Major Crimes Inspector Sean Pike says her death is a homicide, but would not go into details.
But I can confirm at this time we have no information to suggest that there are any other victims or that this investigation is related to any previous incidents.
Pike also confirms that investigators believe Beardy's remains got to the landfill on a garbage truck and were found within a few hours. The partial remains of Rebecca Contois were found at the same landfill, and it is believed the remains of 2 other women are in a private landfill outside the city. Jeremy Skibicki has been charged in connection with those deaths and that of an unidentified woman known only as Buffalo Woman. The landfill is on operational pause while the identification unit continues to work at the scene. Cambria Harris, the daughter of one of Skibicki's victims, posted a simple message on social media. Search the landfills for all remains. An online petition calling for a search is at nearly 18,000 signatures. A feasibility study into a landfill search is underway by a joint committee of police and Indigenous leaders, and this discovery will no doubt add to the urgency. Leanne Sanders, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
As well as to our community that's been devastated for many years. So we'll pray at this time. Mingwet, Mandu, Kanak, Migo, no Gomaga, Niboyak. Ergit, Migo, and Chivichiak, Ketuan Minawa, Makisa, Sikwak, Mandu, we Ketuit. Minante, no Manchu, and Tipatigi Magak. Minam, my decision coming, she activist, so we just shit up. Ma, gig it to it, no, I take with me. We just. I'd like to introduce myself. I'm a senior advisor to Chief and Counsel. My name is Murph Sinclair, and I'd like to introduce Chief Travers right here, Councillor Robert Marston, Councillor Alec Travers, and Councillor George Travers. So at this time, I'd like to give the floor to the Chief.
Hi everyone, it's Chief Travers here. Lake St. Martin is very saddened by the passing of one of our community members, Linda Beardy. Linda Beardy's body was found disposed of in a Winnipeg landfill on April 4th, 2023. Miss Beardy has been a flood evacuee of Lake St. Martin since 2011. She, along with many other community members, have been forcibly displaced by the provincial government and the federal government. The intentional and forcibly displacement of our people has been traumatizing. And yet this is another example of harm and trauma affecting our people. Had our people had the chance to return home to our traditional lands, Linda Beardy might maybe still here today. However, she's returning home in a casket. I want to bring attention to awareness that Indigenous people are not trash, and normalizing having their bodies found in dumpsters is disgraceful. We need to hold authorities accountable in addressing crimes protecting Indigenous women, girls, and men. I want to call the governments as to what is exactly being fulfilled by the federal government's Truth and Reconciliation 94 calls to action. From an Indigenous perspective, the 91 calls of action, or 94 calls of action, is just another false promise by the government. Thank you. On behalf of Lake St. Martin, I'm here with the family, and I'm here with everyone from our community. Thank you. Miigwech. Yeah. You have any questions?
Just the spelling of your name so we can have it right.
Christopher Travers. Traverse. Travers. Christopher CHRISTOPHER.
Chief Travers, are
Yeah.
any members of Linda's family here today?
No, they're not here today.
Is there a message that they gave you?
Yes, there is, and I'm here for the family. I'm gonna go speak to them right away. There's some stuff that's happening behind the scenes, and that's all I can say right now.
I know
No.
she had different points in her life where she was
Yeah.
more vulnerable.
Mhm.
Do you know at the time of her death if this was the case?
Pardon me, I can't hear you.
Was it around at the time of her death, was she in a vulnerable position? Was she considered vulnerable?
That's an ongoing investigation, and it's still ongoing. I can't speak on behalf of the investigation right now. And we're just finding out other stuff that's happening right now in the background that I just found out. So I have to make that short and let the police investigate their investigation.
You also said she was evacuated.
Yeah, she was an evacuee of Lake St. Martin, 2011. She wasn't allowed to return home. She was cut off the evacuee status and forcibly had to stay here in Winnipeg by the federal government.
I know, according to statements from her family, that
Mhm.
she had gone to school in Winnipeg. She was, at least part of her growing up was in Winnipeg.
Mhm.
At what point did she move back to Lake St. Martin?
She wasn't able to move back to Lake St. Martin.
Okay,
She was forcibly had to stay here because the federal government cut our people off. They cut off 1,500 people of mine, and they had to stay in Winnipeg. They're left here from 2011.
Just
Mhm.
again, looking at when she would have been in Winnipeg, there would have been a few years between. Was she in Winnipeg
Mhm.
entirely? Or
Yeah. Well, since 2011. Yeah.
How has her death impacted the community?
It's traumatizing, right? It's traumatizing for our community to endure the flood. We've lost over 200 members since the flood, and it's just ongoing traumatization to my community. You know, I feel for them. I've been in leadership for 15 years, and you know I'm chief now, so you know it's just very traumatizing.
We know that the landfill is closed right
Mhm.
now, but we do not know until when. Do you have any kind of indication about that?
I don't know.
Chief, sorry, just to
No.
clarify, the family did say that she went to school in Winnipeg as a teenager.
Yeah.
Do you know when she moved back to Lake St. Martin and how long she was living there before being displaced in 2011?
No, I don't have those questions.
Okay.
No. Our entire community was displaced in 2011.
Okay.
Right.
I guess along with this,
Mhm.
do you have any other further concerns about?
No, I don't.
people
I
who
just want
are-
to address what was going on here, and one of our community members were disposed of in at the landfill. That's just disheartening, right? It's disgraceful to find bodies over there, especially young women, right?
Yes, for people who are from Lake St. Martin living in Winnipeg,
Mhm.
do you have any concerns about their safety and their vulnerability at this point?
It's a concern for everyone, like growing up in Winnipeg or on a reserve, being young and being traumatized. You know, it's ongoing. Like the transition from being traumatized as a flood evacuee, they grew up as growing up here in the city, and brought back that addiction back to the community. We're dealing with deaths in community from drug overdoses to committed suicides, deaths every other month. 5 of them last month. I'm dealing with three of them right now, and this is for the 4th one in a matter of days. Mm-hmm.
What kind of impact does that have on the community? What kind of impact does that have on the community?
It has a tremendous impact to our community and the health and safety of our community, for sure.
Chief, can you tell us what kind of supports are you asking for?
Just community support from people recognizing Indigenous women being disposed of here at the landfill. You know, like we need the government to consider closing this and make that a landfill memorial site, right? You know, have something in place where you inside a garbage truck where they could scan it before they dump the garbage here. Like there's some things that they could do, right? Maybe you won't find no more dead bodies here at a dump.
How did you feel hearing about this news? One of your own
I
community?
had to gather my thoughts for the last couple of days, so I wanted to see what was going on with the community members first, and the family before I come and make a public announcement. I want to make sure I had some stories straight before making this. So I thank you all for today for meeting me. If there's anything else I could ask.
What are your thoughts on the Winnipeg police saying that they don't believe that this was a homicide, that this was,
That's the stuff in the background that I can't talk about right now. So I'll let it come out with their investigation.
Did that change the message that you had today? Or
Yeah, it did. I had to rewrite some things I had to do, right? So I'm there. All right, thank you. Thanks everyone.
It's more than a shock.
Lucy Beardy is exhausted and in mourning, but she's also angry.
I felt like I was ambushed, like I was set up for this.
Beardy is talking about this news conference on Thursday afternoon. She says she didn't give the Winnipeg police permission to reveal details of her sister Linda's last hours alive.
I told you guys clearly I needed to consult my family.
Police say Linda was seen leaving this store alone on Monday morning, and they've seen security footage that shows her getting into a nearby garbage bin.
And she was actually observed to climb into the bin on her own. Now, there was some activity observed within the bin, and after a short period of time, there was no further activity observed, but she was not observed climbing out of the bin at any time.
The contents were later picked up and dumped at this landfill where city staff found Linda's body. Police have ruled out homicide.
There were no other injuries that suggest any kind of foul play.
Police have not yet responded to Beardy's criticism, but she says she's lost confidence in them.
What I'm asking for and hoping for is an independent investigation, just that would be more thorough and also that we can trust.
She also plans to file a complaint with Manitoba's Law Enforcement Review Agency. But first, she and her family are gathering to remember a life lost.
She was like all her nieces and nephews' favorite auntie. She was smart and strong.
Beardy saw her sister in a Winnipeg mall just last week. Linda asked her to message her son.
And tell him she loves him and that she's been really thinking of her babies and trying to get on a better path.
That path now cut short. Beardy's only consolation is the last thing she said to her sister.
My last words to her were, I love you.
Karen Pauls, CBC News, Winnipeg.
I always grew up with that fear of ending up missing or murdered. And I always had that fear for my mother. And that fear became my worst living nightmare. You can be really, really angry at the world and people, or you can turn your grief around and turn it into something beautiful. And I guess that's what I'm trying to do, and that's by carrying on my mother's legacy through my advocacy. Camp Morgan started after we did blockades at the Birdie landfill. We did 3 days of blockades, and after the third day we decided that we were going to set up Camp Morgan as a tribute to my mother. When I go down to Camp Morgan, we're always doing something different. How's it going, bro? Good, nice seeing you. How's camp going? Back in January, we hung up 101 red dresses, and we've had a couple different other events since then. We've got a lot of community members to come out. We set up a teepee a couple weeks ago. Warriors at Camp Morgan do a good job at protecting camp. They just make sure that things are running smoothly. When we go to Camp Morgan, we're able to chat and explain how we got to where we are today and why we are who we are. Our family has an unfortunate history with landfills. In the late 1800s through the early 1900s, Morgan's great-grandmother, Ava Francis, lived in one. This was an article written when this all first happened on September 6, 1961, about my family. What does resettlement mean to the Indians involved? Don Francis lives on the eastern edge of the highway shack town. He is one of 8 people living in a 20-foot by 20-foot log and tar paper building. The one room has sleeping accommodations for only 4 persons and has no lights or water. In an atmosphere of flies and filth, the Francis family eats and rests from the glare of the summer sun. Asked why she and her people stayed on when life was so poor, Mrs. Francis replied by asking where the group could go. The only other place she claimed was a reserve, and there, if the people don't get rations from the Indian agent, they starve. When these kinds of things happen, it ignites a fire in us, and that fire was ignited over 100 years ago. The only difference was they tried to burn it out with numerous different kinds of colonial systems. My great-grandmother was a residential school survivor herself, and because of that, my grandmother was a survivor of the child welfare system, as well as my mother, who was also pushed through that system, and then she lost her kids to the system, being me, at the age of 6 years old, her only being 24 at the time. That was her downfall, was losing her kids, and when you lose your kids, you lose where your heart and your home is, and she lost that day, as well as her physical home. And you lose your home, you lose your kids, you start to go crazy, you lose your mind. And my mom struggled with mental issues a lot in the end years of her life. She used to sing to me, and I was always told that she was singing even before I was born. My mom used to take me all around the city on bus adventures. And I remember walking up and down Main Street as a kid, and my mom never hid the horrors of the world from me, and she always explained to me, this is what's happening to your mommy, this is why I can't be around, and I wish I could. My mom didn't even have a shack or a home, and she fought to survive, and that survival was taken away from her at the expense of someone else's hands. Indigenous women have walking targets on their back. I never felt safe growing up, and I don't leave my house past 6 p.m. I don't go across the street at a certain time because I'm scared that someone's going to stop and harass me, or I'm scared that I'm going to get robbed or taken. I don't take cabs, and I always tell someone what the license plate is and who I'm driving with, because that's what you got to do nowadays to protect yourself, because no one else is protecting you.
It is important for us to set the record straight. Investigators believe that the remains of Morgan Harris and Mercedes Myron are at the Prairie Green landfill north of the city.
People seem to think that it's easy or it's going to be extremely difficult, and it's going to be extremely difficult and tedious. She knows we're going somewhere. It's time to finally step up and break those generational curses and give my daughter a better chance at life. Oh, let's go. Intergenerational trauma follows and history repeats itself. You fail us once and then you continue to fail us 100 years later. My family went from, let's go this way, being forced off the reserve to living in a landfill to now it being a shocking reality of my mother being underneath lots of debris and trash. Look at this. What is this? The cries of our women get louder and the anger within the families gets bigger. Is this where your grandma is?
What we're left with is the potential task of searching for human remains across a 4-acre site that was 40 feet in depth, heavily compacted with 9,000 tons of wet, heavy construction clay, and distributed throughout the site was 250 tons of asbestos. In addition to that, we had 1,500 tons of animal remains strewn throughout the site, which would make it very difficult to discern human remains if we're conducting a search of that site. We made the very difficult decision as a service that this wasn't operationally feasible to conduct a search of this site.
Why and how did the system fail my mother, and why does it continue to happen to our Indigenous women? Yeah, it makes me sad that I have to put on this fight for my daughter, and that this is taking up my time and energy that I should be spending holding and caressing my kid. But I'm doing it for my daughter so that she can have a better future, and so that I can have a better future with her too, and that one day maybe we won't have to be so scared to go out and even just sit in our front yard as Indigenous women.
Siguli Swagwag, again, that was Cambria Harris, and if you want to see the interview that that we had on stream in February, that I posted the link in there. You can watch that at any point. So the missing and murdered Indigenous people is still an issue that continues. And Nabil, Yanko for the resub. That's 2 months now. Thank you. I appreciate your support. Um, so what I was saying is that the missing and murdered Indigenous people is still an issue in Turtle Island. Now, um, the part of the reason it focuses on missing or murdered Indigenous women and girls is that women ultimately are the backbone of our culture. They are the teachers of our future generations. Um, they are the decision makers, especially in the Haudenosaunee culture. I mean, for us, and there are some other ones that have similar, uh, I guess, similar teachings and traditions. But for us, it's about them being the decision makers. So anything that was to happen in our communities of any substance, the leaders, or what the sachems, or what people now call chiefs, have to go and consult the women, particularly our clan mothers, because those are the ones who are maintaining and overseeing the community. So they decide what our names are. They're the ones who keep track of everyone's names and their clans, and ensure that we're not marrying into the same clan, or there's so many different little intricacies of what they do, and responsibilities that they have to be respected and honored. And so I love that teaching, that ideology is always put the women on a pedestal and respect them for who they are and for what they mean to the community. And so that's always what I'm going to try to pass on to my children and the next 7 generations. Because we had this whole back in November, we had this whole thing about domestic violence and violence against Indigenous women that was put on an event that's put on every year by the Ontario Native Women's Association. And it's a night of poetry, it's a night of music. This year they had Susan Glukark perform, and some music that was performed and some poetry that was written. And every year they put out a book of the poetry that's submitted in called Strong Hands Stop Violence. So there's some great poems in some of these that I like reading every once in a while on stream. So anyone ever gets into a mood where they want to hear a poem, then I've got a lot of poems I can share. So what I want to do now, because the missing or murdered Indigenous people uh, issue, particularly women again, is still going on to this day. I wanted to share a couple of the latest documentaries that I found. Now, these are not; these are all. They are both made within um, within the last year. One was made in May, and the other one was made just before May. I think it was last April or last March. So these are relatively new. So the first one was part of a TV series, and it focuses on an area in Canada known as the Trail of Tears. It's a highway in British Columbia where a huge number of women go missing every year. And a majority of those women, of course, are Indigenous women. So part of what we've been trying to say to the government is to try to alleviate some of this is that there's Indigenous communities out in BC that are in these remote areas, and the only way for them to get from point A to point B is by this highway. So if they would create some sort of GO train or community train that goes from A to B, that would allow them to be able to um, be safe without that. So after okay, I see that your poem demand came up. Okay, I will get that after the first one. I'll do that in between the two films. So the first one here that I'm going to play is again based on the Highway of Tears. This one's actually only about 21 minutes long, so it's not very long anyway. So I'm going to get my face off the screen here again, and we'll get this one started. This one again is taken from a TV series called Taken, and its focus is on the Highway of Tears.
Here, northern British Columbia, the Highway of Tears. Located between Prince Rupert and Prince George, Highway 16 in British Columbia is also known as the Highway of Tears. Countless Indigenous women and girls have either gone missing or have been found murdered, with a common deadly link to the Highway of Tears. It was here that the bodies of Alberta Williams and Ramona Wilson were found murdered years apart. Ramona Wilson and Alberta Williams were living happy lives surrounded by family and friends. Their murders devastated both families, and in each case, the crime remains unsolved. The Highway of Tears is made up of never-ending corridors of logging roads, ravines, and rivers, and can be a haven for concealing criminal activity. But these crimes of opportunity are about more than location. They reveal dark underlying truths about society. At any time during this broadcast or afterward, if you have any information that might help solve the case of the murder of Alberta Williams or Ramona Wilson, visit our website. Someone out there has answers. Our goal is to find them. Alberta Williams was 24 years old when she was murdered. Her body discarded and found near the Highway of Tears on September 25th, 1989. Alberta Williams and her family hail from Gitxsan First Nation near Hazelton, British Columbia. It's at the most northern section of Highway 16, less than 300 kilometers from Prince Rupert. Alberta's sister, Claudia Williams, recalls life at home as close-knit and carefree.
Alberta, you know, just like my other sisters do, I think we're all brought up to be very happy. I don't think there was any one of us that were sad, just happy, just kind of welcome things as they come. You know, so I like to help people a lot, socializer. I would say that my sister was more of a socializer than I was.
In the summer of 1989, when Alberta was 24 years old, she and Claudia lived with family in Prince Rupert while working at a local cannery. Working seasonally was common for local residents.
Prince Rupert's not that big. We pretty well know a lot of the people that go to the canneries to work. A lot of them are probably from the reserves all along the Skeena there. Some of them from the Nass. You know, a lot of them out to do the same thing we are. We weren't strangers there.
At summer's end, Alberta and Claudia went with friends to a local bar to celebrate and say their goodbyes for the season. When the pub closed, Alberta begged Claudia to go with her to another party.
So I went along with everybody up the stairs. There was a group standing right in front of the pub. Alberta was there, I was there. She's again still trying to convince me. Claudia, come with me. And then to my right, the guy that I was going out with at the time distracted me. Then I turned around. Oh my God, Alberta was gone. So was everybody. I could not believe it. I'm like, how could people disappear so fast? Not only that table that she was sitting with, but I'm talking everybody within that time.
At first, Alberta's family believed she would be home soon. But when 2 days passed with no contact, the family knew something wasn't right.
I think it was the second day, late the second day, that, you know, ended up phoning the police. Look, she's not home. But there was no contact, nothing.
The family couldn't wait for police to organize a search and began looking on their own.
There was me, my brothers, sisters, and all that. We were searching through the brushes. I don't know. I mean, Dad asked us to do this to us. We're like, God, Dad, you know, like, why are we looking in the bushes? But you could see his face. He was so hurt.
On September 25th, 1989, Alberta Williams' body was found 37 kilometers east of Prince Rupert near the Tyee overpass. Her death was ruled a homicide. There have been no arrests.
I don't even know why anybody would even look at her and to think to hurt her. Plus, you know, she's so kind, she wouldn't even hurt anybody. If anything, she'd be the one trying to help you.
Project Ipana was formed in 2005 as a result of major unsolved crimes linked to the Highway of Tears. They have specifically targeted 18 cases that are currently active. That number is conservative. Many remote communities have lost people, and unofficial estimates are considerably higher.
She was a young girl in Prince Rupert, and she was out with her friends and family the night that she went missing, and she was found sometime later, on the highway between Prince Rupert and Terrace, and off into there was a rail tie yard, and we've looked at all kinds of people. I think we've identified everybody that's worked at the with the rail company, and like nothing.
Alberta was added to the e-panel list of active investigations, but Claudia has taken matters into her own hands, enlisting the expertise of private investigator Ray McCalco.
I'm a licensed private investigator in British Columbia and got involved investigating the cases on the Highway of Tears about 9 years ago. I was following the story and decided that I would get personally involved and try to see if I could come up with some information which I may be able to then pass along to the police. It's frustrating because my goal is to solve one of these cases, and I think that close doesn't count in this kind of a thing. So I'm sure the police are close as well. They just don't do a very good job of explaining to the families what, if anything, they've done.
The hardest time I have is dealing with the families, and like every meeting's emotional for them. I want to tell them that I just haven't done a bunch of work and come up with nothing. I want to tell them that we've solved it.
When you lose a sister like that, especially when we're so close that night, and I lost her in a blink, literally in a blink of an eye, it feels like I walk under a cloud. You know, my sister is gone, and you know, because I was with her that night, I carry so much guilt because, you know, I could have went with her, but I didn't.
Alberta Williams was a 24-year-old woman who was viciously murdered and discarded by the Highway of Tears and found on September 25th, 1989. Who did Alberta meet up with that night after the bar on August 15th, 1989? Was it someone she knew or a stranger? If you have any information or to find out more about Alberta Williams or Ramona Wilson, go to our website. On June 11th, 1994, Ramona Wilson left home to visit friends in nearby Morristown, BC. In April of 1995, Ramona's remains were found near Highway 16. Who made sure Ramona didn't arrive at her friend's house and that she would never see her family again? The night Ramona disappeared, she made plans to go to her friend's house that evening in Morristown, 25 minutes west of Smithers on Highway 16. It's not known how she intended to get there. All is known is that she didn't arrive. Her mother, Matilda Wilson, recalls the day.
She was going to her friend, her best friend's place, and they were going to a dance, and I didn't know that she was never going to come home that night.
Ramona's sister Brenda remembers the agony of her disappearance.
Yeah, it was just devastating to know something terrible had happened to her. And, you know, we knew something terrible happened to her because she would have called home.
Ramona was her family's pride and joy from the day she was born.
She was born on February 15th, 1978, and she was only 6 pounds. She had really curly hair, and she had beautiful eyes, brown eyes.
Ramona was the youngest of 6 and was adored by her siblings.
I was so happy that there was another girl in the family. She just, you know, really brought a lot of joy to our family, and all my brothers, you know, just cherished her. They would be very protective of her and, you know, keep tabs on where she was and where she was going, and because I waited all those years.
Ramona enjoyed sports and expressed herself through poetry. Many of her poems dealt with issues she and her friends faced growing up in a remote community.
As I look out to the bright blue sky this chilly autumn day, there is no way I can thank the Creator, no way to repay, for the lovely sights to heart's content that He has let me see, for joys and laughter that I've lived and the love that He gave me.
She did quite a few poems that we collected in a photo album. You know, she really talked about the Creator and you know how she wished that things could be better for people's lives, that they could, you know, really live the lives that they wanted to live without fear, without pain, you know, without violence.
Finally, in April 1995, Ramona was found nearly a year after her disappearance.
There's a couple of people that were 4x4ing, and they had got stuck in the mud when they ran across Ramona's remains, and that was April 10th, 1995.
Her body was found in a wooded area off Yellock Road near the Smithers Airport. Her clothes were also found, neatly placed nearby, as was a partially buried length of rope and several plastic zip ties linked together. 22 years after Ramona was taken, law enforcement still has no answers.
The Ramona Wilson case continues to be a very active case. She's a young girl at the time that she went missing. You know, like all of them, they're all still very solvable. We haven't got any closer, unfortunately, but you know what we have done is we've eliminated many people, and it's a shallow victory, but it's something.
Chief Terry Teegee of the Carrier 2nd E Tribal Council knows too well the challenges faced by people in his area.
I represent 7-8 communities in the CSTC territories, and our exact territory is about 72,000 square kilometers, which is basically the size of Ireland.
One of the obstacles that Indigenous people living in this remote area face is the lack of safe, affordable transportation.
What's difficult for a lot of our community members is that in the end, how are you going to get to an urban center? How are you going to get to point A to point B if you have an appointment or you have to go back to school? So a lot of our membership, or a lot of people along the highway, just decide to make that choice and hitchhike. And it's a crime of opportunity. Many of the cases are a lot of these women, which were a lot of First Nations, were victimized.
Matilda continues to honor Ramona's memory despite the years that have passed.
She loved people, and she loved her culture, and she always tried to be kind to everyone. And I hope someday that they will solve her murder.
Ramona Wilson was living an exciting life as a teenager, but that life was cut short. What happened to Ramona Wilson? And is the only link between her case and Alberta Williams that they were both taken from the Highway of Tears? If you have information on either case, go to our website. Alberta Williams was 24 years old when she was murdered. Her body found near the Tyee overpass on September 25, 1989. Her killer has not been found. Ramona Wilson was just 16, excited to spend the weekend with friends in nearby Morristown. But she was taken before she could get there safely. It would be almost a year before her body was found near Yellock Road in April 1995. How do these murders linked to the Highway of Tears continue to go unsolved? How can these acts of violence in this location be explained? Craig Benjamin and Amnesty International Canada are working closely with First Nation communities affected by these crimes.
We've spent a lot of time in northern British Columbia. We have been working to draw attention both to individual stories, but also to the larger patterns of violence. When a woman goes missing, when there's suspicion that she may have been victim of foul play, that there's a full, thorough police investigation, that the families are kept informed, that the families see justice.
There is evidence to suggest that cases of missing and murdered along Highway 16 are part of a much larger pattern of violence against Indigenous women and girls in Canada.
There is a systemic problem here. The very fact that we are looking at rates of violence 7-8 times higher than that experienced by all other women and girls in Canada, that this violence does not come just from a single source, but is pervasive. This is violence that occurs in the home, but it also occurs in the streets. The very fact that this violence could go on year after year tells us that there's something fundamentally wrong here.
Chief Terry Teegee is all too familiar with the many challenges of living in a remote Northern Territory. The people of the Carrier-Sakani region are isolated, and Highway 16, the Highway of Tears, is frequently the road most traveled.
Well, logistically, for anybody who's in our territory or in one of our communities, it's very difficult for economic development and for having a steady job or getting adequate education. So a lot of our people don't have a reliable transit system, don't have a vehicle. So what do? You hitchhike, and it's the easiest and cheapest way to travel. What's frustrating is that how our women are treated as individuals and how they're seen. And what we need is a fundamental change in this society of how not only Aboriginal women are seen, but how First Nations in this country are seen.
For Alberta Williams' family, the passing of time has not erased the memory of her disappearance. Her sister Claudia is still angry at how suddenly and tragically the events of that night unfolded.
Alberta was categorized as missing and murdered women. She was not a missing and murdered woman. She was my sister. She was our sister. She didn't go out on that highway. She didn't hitchhike. And it's not even her character. I pray for some of the families out there that are still searching. They're searching. I can't imagine what that's like.
Every year since 1995, Ramona Wilson's family organizes a commemorative walk in Smithers, BC. They celebrate Ramona's life and remind the world whoever did this is still out there.
What we've done all through the years was to let people know that we're going to be standing there every June to let people know not to forget the loved ones that have been murdered or not found.
We try to involve everybody so that, there's a collaboration of people, bringing them together so that they don't forget about, Ramona's case, and that there's still no answers, and that there's more and more women going missing. And I think it's a really good way to bring that awareness.
When I was going through this for 10 months, I'm just imagining what these parents are going through. They haven't found their loved ones. It is so hard. It's so difficult. I pray for them every day, even though my daughter's murder hasn't been solved. But that's the hardest, the most difficult to go through is when you haven't found them yet. But we're strong. We shall always walk. We shall always walk. We'll be walking for them every year. Yes.
For Chief Terry Teegee, the Highway of Tears is both symbolic and personal. Matilda Wilson is Teegee's aunt, and Ramona was his cousin. He has never come to grips with her murder.
Finding Ramona's remains really impacted the family. When I see my aunt, she's changed. These crimes change people, and I couldn't imagine how she felt. I have an 11-year-old daughter now, and I couldn't imagine losing my daughter in such a horrific way, and I think that's what drives me. That's what drives a lot of the families up in the Highway of Tears, or Picton Farm, or Loretta Saunders, or Tina Fontaine. Is that's what drives you to say that we don't want this to happen to another family, and
For more information about Alberta Williams and Ramona Wilson, visit our website.
Sgoli swagwag, galakindi niogat, swagi slewagi, niwag daloda, onidag ngwe wenege, ani, bojo, danse, okinapi, how, yanko, yugodonos. Uh, my homie Totero, Yanko for the raid. I appreciate you bringing your community over, and for the raiders, welcome in. What I said is I always introduce myself in my original language. So I said, Sagoli Swagwag, or hello everyone. Galahindi Neogets. So Galahindi is my name. It translates to clouds passing over in the colonial language. And I'm a member of the people of the Standing Stone First Nations here on the northern part of Turtle Island that has been segregated and relabeled Canada. And within the confines of that definition, I'm in a small area called southwestern Ontario. And I said, Yanko, Yugodona, or thank you, friends, for joining me and welcome. And I appreciate everyone who has some time to hang out and hopefully get something out of the streams. And if you're here for the first time, um, what I do is essentially is everything indigenous. So all the content that I share is related to the original peoples here on Turtle Island. So the Inuit, the Métis, First Nations, and the Mexicanos. It's all here. It's our traditions. It's our teachings. Our experiences. I say experiences because I don't like using the word stories. Although I know that it's very common and very easy to do. We want to tell you our stories, um, but it's more than stories. These, what we say and what we share are experiences. And those experiences come across as teachings in some cases. In some cases, they're just methods of creating bonds between people. And so it's a way for us to unite and connect with each other, just as we do with the natural world, the water, the earth, and the plants and the animals. So we we do two things. We do education and awareness streams. It's kind of what we're doing today. I will keep this VOD up after. So if you missed the first part of this stream, the first part was focused on the Wetsuweten territory, which is out in the area that we now call British Columbia, and the systemic racism and oppression that is perpetuated onto the Wet'suwet'en people through a colonial system that is breaking their own laws, and what they're doing with the people out in Wet'suwet'en. So you can always watch back that the VOD if you missed out and are interested in it. This part of the stream we're focusing on um, missing or murdered Indigenous women. So what triggered this was the fact that another woman was just found in the landfill, the Brady landfill in Winnipeg, Manitoba, and one of two landfills in Winnipeg that we are still not seeing being searched, even though there's um, there's this recent sister that was found, and three other ones who are suspected to be in either or of those two landfills. Not to mention the fact that if they do a search, it's almost guaranteed they're going to find many others. Um, so I think that that might be a bit um, have a bit of an effect as to why they're trying to drag their feet on this, because they don't want to see the number of women that they're going to end up finding in these landfills when they finally do get to doing a search. And there are people in who have set up camp called Camp Morgan um, outside of. Uh, Initially, it was actually outside of the Brady landfill, but I think they just moved it a couple of days ago over to the Prairie Green landfill, just because that's where, um, or was it the other way around? But they just moved their camp as a result of this issue that's going on with Linda Beardy, the 33-year-old mother of, I think she was a mother of three kids, um, or four kids, and now there's information there with a link that you can actually, if you want to support the Linda Beardy family, because now they do have to figure out what they're going to do as far as funeral expenses and child care and all the other stuff that goes along with that. And if you want to support the camp itself, there's an email you can e-transfer if you guys are so inclined to be able to support them. It's not necessary, but it is helpful. Anything that you can help them with. So just before you got here in that last video, my homie Terry um, Zamboni actually redeemed a poem demand. So, as I was saying, every year the Ontario Native Women's Association has a night of poetry and entertainment and arts. So there's artwork that gets done, there's poetry that gets read, there's musicians that put on music, and they call it Strong Hands Stop Violence. They've been doing this now for 7 years. Every year, they publish the poems that were submitted into a book like this, and then they give it out the following year. So the anyone who knows the project that I've recently started, well, not so recently now, it's about a year now, called the Peaceful Warrior Project. The Peaceful Warrior is a poem about standing up for people who can't stand up for themselves. I submitted that poem into their last event back in November, so that'll be in next year's Strong Strong Hands Stop Violence book, which I'm really honored to be included in. So that's really cool. So I have a point redemption for a poem, and Zamboni has submitted that or redeemed that. So I am, I've not read a lot of these, but I'm just kind of not sure where to start. How about I just start at the beginning? We'll go with the very first one. So the very first poem in here is actually written by Lee Miracle. And anybody who doesn't know Lee Miracle, she was a poem. She's passed away now. She's passed, I think, just a year ago, maybe 2 years ago. She's the granddaughter of Chief Joseph. Oh my God, gone. But anyway, I'm going to read her poem first of all here for Zamboni. So she titles this War. So in my body flows the blood of Gaelic. Bastille stormers in the soft, gentle ways of Salish Cree womanhood. Deep-throated bass tones dissipate, swallowed by the earth. Uproarious laughter sears and mutilates my voice. Child of the earth tear of west coast rain, dew, dew drops sparkling in the crisp, clear sun of my home. Warm woman of the Mediterranean sunscape, bleaching rough cotton sweatshop anniversary. Thunderous, rude earthquakes that split my spirit within. tiny grapes of wine console me. Can I deny a heritage blackened by the toil of billions, conceived in rape, plunder, and butchery? In the veins that fight the root themselves, in the wondrous breath of my homeland, races the blood of base humanity. European theft, liar, bloodsucker, I deny you not, I fear you not. Your reality and mine are no longer rankles me. I am moved by my love for human life, by the firm conviction that all the world must stop the butchery and stop the slaughter. I am moved by my scars, by my own filth to shed the blood of those who betray themselves. To life, world humanity I ascribe. To my people, to my history, I address my vision. So that was the um, actually. I'll read one more here for you, Zamboni. Since they don't seem to be really long. This one is called Untitled by Benjamin Murray. She spit in your face. So what did you do? Did you follow procedures? Did you follow through? Did you notice the tears streaming down this girl's face? Or the look in her eye when you put her in her place? Let's face facts. It starts in the past. Systemic oppression. Let's look at the math. 10 times more likely to end up in jail. But 95% are not granted bail. 90% have to serve a full sentence. If you're white, it's all right, only 60% is. First Nations women make up only 4% of us all, yet make up 16% of those murdered overall. So I ask you today, on the river of tears, have we not traveled this water for far too many years? When will we admit to what's going on? Nothing gets better when curtains are drawn. Open your hearts, your eyes, and your souls, keeping in mind for whom the bell tolls. Will you stand up for those who don't have a choice? We're given one life, one world, one voice. I like that one. Nova, yeah, go for this for subscribing. You've been here 2 months already. Time is uh, time is going by so fast sometimes. So what we want to do next is I'm going to play the second short documentary here that we had tonight. Now, the second one is not focused on the Trail of Tears, but it's just focused on missing and murdered Indigenous women. So I'm going to go in here and see where did I put it. Oh, I just had it. Here we go. This is called They Are Gone. It was done in 2022. So again, it's a relatively new documentary. It's only it's less than a year old. It was just done. Um, yeah, time is a loop. How true. So let me get my face off the screen here again, and hopefully you guys can get and get something from this documentary.
was a little post here. I don't know where it went. But there's some flowers here. I'm her grandma on the mother's side of the family. And I kept Selena during the school year so she could go to school here at Hardin.
When my sister had the twins, you know, she was a little overwhelmed being a single mother, so that's where I stepped in and I helped. Watched Selena and her twin sister grow from the day they were born to the day they both left us.
So what happened to Selena's twin?
In 2014, amid just some custody battles and stuff, so when it was her day to be picked up, she said, I'm not going, and she went to her room, and 15-20 minutes later, when they went to check on her, she had hung herself from the bunk bed. You know, Selena spent the last 5-6 years finding herself and dealing with a few, you know, other losses along the way. Another sister, Tristan, and her brother, Preston, you know, and we lost Selena this year, so tomorrow will be their birthday.
She's in her junior year. She was just halfway through the year now because she was taking her Christmas break when this all happened.
The first day, the sheriff was driving in that field all over with his lights and sirens going, Selena, Selena, hollering. We had a drone fly that night from Burlington Northern, and we also had a helicopter fly that day, and we had people on the ground, all over, on the ground, in vehicles, on ATVs. So that was all day one. Day one did not go in vain. People seen my message, strangers seen my message and went there. Strangers responded to a cry for help on Facebook, you know, and so I wake up, you know, I go to bed checking on her. Still no Selena, and I'm like, how? Why? What's going on, you know? She should have been found by now had she been in the field they say she was in.
And at this time, if you haven't, please light your candle for those missing and murdered Indigenous women, and as well as Selena Not Afraid. Could I please invite to the microphone Crow Tribal Chairman Mr. Elvin Not Afraid Jr. to say a few words and address you all. Welcome.
All the Not Afraids out there recognize the importance of this run, and the Not Afraids that also live within the Northern Cheyenne also recognize that the Northern Cheyenne leadership also is a great proponent of the MMIW. It hits everybody, it doesn't discriminate.
I'm sorry that we couldn't find Selena. We did our best. I'm proud of my crew. We're not done. We just had, we went out and looked for one of our own today. To the parents, to anybody out there who's listening, step up. Just bring our kids home. Just bring our people home.
heard about the run coming from the Dakotas this way, we thought, okay, we need to take part in it some way.
Do you know anybody personally that's gone missing?
Yeah, I have a first cousin, her husband and their child went missing, and to date, they found the remains of her and her husband, and to date, we still haven't found the baby. It's always happened, it's just getting a lot more notoriety right now. It's because people are saying enough's enough, and we need to find a way to, something's got to be done, something's got to end it. We need awareness, we need things in place to where we can minimize the amount of times this happens.
Listen up! They said since they're running behind schedule, they're going to drive to the park and then run from the park to the school. So if you want to meet at the park, that's where we're going to run from.
Don't give up, you know. When you're 18, 19, 20 days, that's nothing. You know, when I was getting frustrated, I was telling myself, what if you're at 1,020 days? What if you're at 2,020 days, like some families, Cheryl, you know? You're only at day 18, day 19, you know, hang in there. I tell you that 20 days felt like a lifetime. I can't imagine the families, how they feel now that are still looking. You know, it's like you're in a club where you're all getting to know each other now. But you're in a club you don't want to be in. You're in a club that you're not even asked if you want to be in. You're just put in it because your loved one is either missing or murdered.
We have one of the highest rates of missing murdered people in the country. And it seems like nobody was keeping track of this. It was like we were just kind of be put to the wayside. And one thing that I would tell you, and I always tell this when I speak, is it was like another dead Indian. That's all it was.
We know that Native American women face higher prevalence of violence. A 2016 study by the National Institute of Justice using 2010 data from the CDC showed that 56% of Native American women had experienced sexual assault in their lifetimes, compared to 50% of non-Hispanic white women. We also know that about 56% of Native American women have experienced physical violence from an intimate partner, compared to about 34% of non-Hispanic whites. So we know the prevalence of those two types of violence are higher for Native American women, and that's directly related to the missing and murdered Indigenous women crisis.
What do you think is the root cause of that? Why is there so much violence among this community towards
alcohol.
girls?
I would say that every one of these situations have to do with alcohol. One way or the other, alcohol is involved. Whether the assailant has alcohol or the victim has alcohol, it is alcohol.
How did Selena get there the night before? So
Jackie and Misty dropped her off at that house.
do they know the people who were at the house?
No, they didn't know them. Jackie didn't go in and check with them to see who they were or get a phone number from an adult. Whoever invited Selena, which I found out now was the two girls, they told her to come over and have watch movies, and they'll eat popcorn for New Year's Eve. But it was adult party. We found out later.
After a night at Shooter's Bar in Billings and a morning at the Bayou Bar in Billings, the group eventually made its way down I-90 towards Hardin.
Robert Fogg in the morning was driving, and Wayne Old Crow was on the passenger side here, and in the back was Selena. She was the only minor, all the rest are adults. And there was Sarah Olhorn and Shanna Spotted Bear and Arlana Pretty on Top Harjo in there in the van. And so anyway, they Arlana and Selena were the ones that they left at the rest area, and they took off and left them there. and we can't find out anything more after that happened. Some of the cases have been open for 20 years in Bighorn County, and they haven't solved any of them yet. And it's like Selena's the 28th case.
I mean, we can go back decades of missing, murdered people. Iris Whistling Elk laying in a ditch in Ashland. You got Carrie Lynn Birdhat found frozen in the ditch. Denise Russell, last time we saw her, she was walking down the road. Her body was found, my broadest, 2 broken legs. K-Sarah stops. She was missing for weeks. And then all of a sudden her body's found out in the open by a street that's used by everybody.
Hardin is about a half an hour's drive south of Billings. So it borders one of the largest cities here. It also borders the largest Indian reservation here. Recent studies and surveys and activist groups have come in and collected data, and all of this data has shown that Bighorn County, Yellowstone County, and Rosebud County, which are all connected, kind of that corridor from I-90 to Highway 212, that 3-county area is probably the hottest spot in the country for murdered and missing Indigenous people, but in particular women and girls.
And how are you related to K-Sarah Stops?
I am her aunt. After Crow Fair was over, her mother's plans were to come after her so she could go back to Missoula to live with her mother in Missoula. And her mother was supposed to be here on the 25th, so the night of the 24th, she had plans with her and her best friend to go out. That night she got dressed up and said, "I love you," and walked out the door. My son Ronald chased her down and told her, that as being a big brother, he wanted her brought home by midnight. And she said she would, and they went and never came back.
We know that Bighorn County has failed in bringing justice for K-Sarah, and for some reason, the unknown reason that we don't know yet, they concealed the fact that the body that they found here a year ago was K-Sarah, when the officials knew that it was her. Because in subsequent actions taken, those actions are based on the identity of her body that was found here. But yet the family, her mom, her dad, myself as her guardian, everyone was not notified until September 11th. Many days later, we were continually looking for her.
Why do you think law enforcement seems to be ignoring, or at least not even communicating with your family?
I don't know. Unless they just dropped the case, I don't know.
So you don't even know if the case is under investigation or not?
I don't even know anything yet. It's just the sheriff's my uncle, and I don't know what's going on there because I hardly see him. He should at least push it. At least give us a closure, because we're so hurt, we're so hurt losing our loved ones. And
from what I understand in talking to family members and then talking to people in the courthouse, people in the sheriff's office. The investigation is pretty much stalled, and has been from the get-go. When Priscilla did not get the location alert from K. Sarah, she said she knew right away that something was wrong. Priscilla knows the dangers of the world. You know, she had been abducted as a child herself. And when she went to report her as missing, I don't think that it was taken seriously the way it should have been. What she had told us for our article was that the deputy who took the report wrote it in a notebook, a little memo notebook, did not take her phone number of the cell phone that K. Sarah had, didn't take information about the cell phone provider, didn't really take much of a description of the clothing she was wearing, didn't take much of a description of what K. Sarah really looked like. Priscilla had to offer to give him the photo. He didn't ask really for a photo of her. It was kind of rookie mistakes. The sheriff, I don't know how he got reelected. There has been, you know, criminal charges filed against him previously. There has been allegations of him not doing his job effectively, not caring, not investigating things properly, you know, all kinds of rumors and innuendo, but he still got voted in. We have Bighorn County Sheriffs, we have Montana Highway Patrol, we have the federal BIA agents. The tribe temporarily, I guess, had a police department. I don't know if they're gonna start that up again. So that's what, 4 law enforcement agencies all covering the same area. Some of the land here is checkerboarded so complexly that you could step 3 feet over and be in a different jurisdiction. And that makes things difficult for investigators, especially if there's no co-jurisdictional agreements in place.
So in determining which agency would be the lead law enforcement agency when someone goes missing, you need to ask several questions. The first question is whether or not the person went missing on or off a Native American reservation. If the person went missing off the Native American reservation, it doesn't matter if the person is Native American or not. The local law enforcement entity would be the primary law enforcement agency with responsibility for the search. So whether that's the sheriff's office or the police department, they would be the lead. If it's suspected that the person was the victim of a federal crime, for instance, interstate kidnapping, FBI may also have jurisdiction in those type of cases. Now, if the person went missing on a Native American reservation, then you have to ask some more questions. The first question is whether or not the tribe is and the reservation are a public law 280 reservation or not a public law 280 reservation. Here in Montana, the Flathead Reservation is a public law 280 reservation, and what that means is the tribe is ceded major crimes jurisdiction to the state of Montana. So if someone goes missing, for instance, a non-Native American goes missing on the Flathead Reservation, the sheriff's office or the police department would be the lead agency. Now, if it's a Native American who goes missing, it's likely the tribal law enforcement who'd be the lead agency, but if a crime is suspected, a felony crime is suspected, then it would shift over to the sheriff's office. So that's a public law 280 reservation. The other reservations in Montana are non-public law 280 reservations. Then it gets more complicated. Then you have to ask, did the person who go missing, is that person a Native American or are they not a Native American? If they're not a Native American, then it's likely that the sheriff's office is going to be the lead agency in the search. If the person who went missing is a Native American, then it's likely that either the tribal law enforcement or BIA law enforcement is going to be the lead agency. Now, if it's a Native American and a crime is suspected, then at some point either BIA investigators or if there are any, or the FBI may also have jurisdiction and become significantly involved.
What we have found was that with the FBI, that oftentimes they come on board when it's already a week or 2 weeks into the whole incident, and the first 48 hours in any kind of investigation is important. So sometimes you already have the leads are either have gone underground, or the evidence has been basically spoiled, and so they don't have the information to move forward, or sometimes they just don't.
I mean, when you find there's a murder off the reservation, like Case Sarah's, they tend to brush it under the rug. And I think it not only extends to law enforcement, it extends to the coroner's office, to others. And it's like we almost accepted that fact, that law enforcement would deal with it. And to me, law enforcement just got lax. Oh, nobody's going to question this, so we're just going to declare it undetermined, died of exposure, died of alcohol poisoning, without really saying it was a criminal act.
But it's always ruled as a dismiss. And that's how I feel about us Native Americans. We're just dismissed. And we're just as important as everybody else. We bleed red as everybody else. We all bleed red.
So I'm here today because of the missing women indigenous. I'm only 18, I never graduated high school, and I am a victim of a little bit of what's going on. I know that I was a survivor, and I will not let this die down, because I could feel the pain, and it's really heartbreaking because all we have is each other in the reservations, and all we ever had was each other in the reservations. And a lot of the women bring a lot of life into the earth, into this world. And it sucks that they're doing young women. They're kidnapping young women, they're murdering, and yet we have no justice.
The 212 is a travel route for drug trafficking, I-90, 94. We're at the crossroads. Along with that then comes trafficking, to the point of just stealing people and selling them.
What pushed me to do this today was I was kidnapped about 2 years ago, and it was the worst experience of my life. And it's just like, you know, when I heard that she went missing and they couldn't find her, it took 20 days, it's like the memories came back from my trauma, you know, and it's like other things could also happen to her, could have happened to her, and like I would think about, you know, her family, you know, like the same thoughts probably ran through their head, you know, like when she was kidnapped by someone who is into sex trafficking, or someone that's just, you know, on that side of the category. And I think I could take a break really quick.
Human trafficking often occurs when there's a vulnerable target. And if you look at an adolescent, they're insecure about themselves. And let's say an adolescent female. And in this case, when they're unsure, when they have an opportunity, and these human traffickers are predators, and they are professional predators. So what they look for are vulnerable people, people who come from an area of substance abuse, people who might have mental health issues, people who lack self-esteem, or people who don't have everything in life that they should. So if I'm in an area where there's a lot of poverty and not a lot of money, and I have that brand new iPhone 12 and say, I will give you this iPhone 12, just come with me, it can be very enticing for someone to want to leave an area of poverty. It's unfortunate, but areas where there are indigenous people on reservations, there are areas of poverty. So that can be an opportunity to move somebody away.
When we look at the entirety of Montana, in Billings plays a big part in the trafficking of the entirety of the state. But if we start by looking at the entirety of the state, what we see and why Montana is so vulnerable when it comes to human trafficking is in large part the lack of resources we have for law enforcement. Up until last year, we only had one agent in the entire state whose sole job was to investigate human trafficking. And Montana geographically is the 4th largest state in the United States of America. One person dedicated to the entirety of the state, that is an open door to traffickers.
The Northern Cheyenne Reservation is over 400,000 acres. We have 2 cops. And it's like that on most reservations.
There's a detention center in Hardin, Montana. And there's approximately 300 beds in here, a little over. During this COVID-19 pandemic, BIA cut the amount of beds they were going to use in this facility down to somewhere around 140 beds, so they cut the capacity in half. Meanwhile, we're over here in Lame Deer, and we have our own jail. It's a BIA jail. It is a fiduciary responsibility to BIA to do the upkeep to keep this jail open. Well, they quit doing it years ago. Now our jail is condemned. They're not going to use it. So we got no jail at home. We got this facility running half-mast in Hardin, Montana, which is an hour away.
With that capacity cut in half, I heard the BIA was only picking up people for Class A felonies.
So, once again, this unintended consequence of having this detention center open really nipped everybody in the bud. And so, like you said, the feds, BIA is only picking up these Class A felonies.
That was puppy.
What?
But we've got about 50 to 80 people that show up. We got 30 people that are regular here, and we're stopping DUIs, fights, elder abuse, you name it. We're fighting against that disease that humanity has.
We even had calls that some girls were getting abducted by truckers, and we actually chased trucks down to see if there was anybody native or anybody on it.
Was anybody on any of them?
There was one incident that right now we have to be silent about it, but I believe that there was something that happened and we caught that vehicle by Broadus. So that's kind of an ongoing thing, but I guess I'll say yes. There was a girl on there and we brought her home. So who was the call? I don't know.
They were fighting, and this guy was fighting, and he was real combative, and he was pushing, trying to fight us. Come running out, Melinda Crazy Mills boy. All right, come running out. We're standing on the street, and he come running up to me, and I pulled this pepper spray pistol out, shot him in the face with it. Ruined him right there, boys. I ran back to his house. Boy, Jesus.
We're kind of in a real situation here, especially with the COVID-19 going on and everything that happens. This is just a daily occurrence since March 14th, but it's been going on even before that. It was just awareness about when this COVID came around, but then the soldiers and some of the people that get involved. The reason why we have women here anyway is because of sometimes we have run-ins with women. And we don't want, we want to make sure there's a woman in place to be able to take them to wherever they have to go.
This community is so quick to call us for help, and then when we turn around and burden us, they get mad for doing it, and it's so upside down. But we just got to continue doing what we're doing. and we're retraining everybody because no one really grew up like this. So it's just when you have children in your house and you teach them right from wrong, we're starting at an older age. And then once you start using chronically using alcohol and drugs, most of these people started drinking when they were 9, 10 years old. Your brain quits. So you become a 30-year-old man who started drinking when you're 9. So you're dealing with a grown man with the mentality of a 9-year-old.
But it's a generational trauma. Like, people's grandparents died of alcoholism, you know, and so that's what they think is normal. Oh, yeah. And so they just repeat it and repeat it. And I think it's just now starting to come to a change to where, like, people our age that have been through that finally we're starting to see the light. That's why we like to have these kids around, you know, and at least this is keeping them sober. So as long as we can keep these kids from starting to drink till they're, you know, forever, or until they're 21 at least, or, you know, 13, 14.
Save them a few years, huh?
Yeah, and then by us being examples, trying to make a difference in the community. I mean, this is the epitome of neighborhood watch. What they're doing. It's what neighborhood watch is all about. And if we can be a guide to the younger generations to avoid our mistakes and the mistakes that they see every day down here, we try to show them that you get drunk, bad things happen when you get drunk.
Since the death of Kaimani Littlebird, there's been a lot of people bringing out justice for us. I mean, there's a whole slew of names now. You're looking maybe, and it's going back 20 years, 30 years. So this has brought out awareness. So we like to do this to bring out awareness to everybody.
Son died a real warrior for the cause, murdered by his own friends who like to drink alcohol.
Why do you think your son was murdered? Why would somebody want to murder your son?
Because my son's been busting their parties out there all week.
I was there for Kaimani since he was born.
So this is where they say he hung himself.
And when I think about this and I replay it over and over, it don't make sense. I brought you out here to Crazy Heads because I felt this was the better place to tell this story. At the early morning of June 25th, 2020, I received a phone call from my sister-in-law, Nancy Big Hawk. And it's not the kind of phone call you want to get. All I heard her say is, "Did you hear what happened to Kaimani?" And I was like, what? You know, because it didn't sound bad, you know, when she first called. And then she went really quiet. And then I said, man, I took a deep breath. I knew that something was wrong. And she said, they found him at Crazy Heads and he's dead. When security got here, he was laying down here. He was laying right here. Yeah, the security got here. His leg was right here, and he was laying here, and nobody's seen him hanging, except for the two drunk girls that were here. So, and as intoxicated as they were, they couldn't get him down.
It's a painful thing, man, and wow. So we got out there and the nightmare was real, man. My son was dead. And everything just didn't seem right, and I know my son didn't commit suicide. I know somebody did something to him, man.
I don't know. I wasn't here. I don't know what happened. But I could tell you this. I know that Kaimani didn't hang himself. And I could tell you that I seen his body when
The coroner had him here. I seen him when he was laying at the morgue. We just want justice.
Bad company corrupts good morals, man. You can have a good heart, but once you get influenced by a bad person, yeah, he can influence your heart and your thoughts, and you can do bad things. And that's what's going on in our community. These kids are influencing one another to do alcohol and drugs, and the parents they're pretty much allowing it by not getting after their kids when they're drinking.
Why do you think that is? Why do you think parents are allowing it and not?
Because it's just part of our discouragement. I mean, we've been discouraged for so long. They took our land away from us. We're oppressed people, man. Discouragement's part of our to white folks like you, when you guys get discouraged, you can overcome it, but as natives we can't, because it's embedded in our DNA.
Well, there is a lot of new literature coming out which talks about historic trauma, and the idea is that what has happened in the past can influence generations to come, because the tragedies that people experience are held over from one generation to the next. Some research even suggests that it changes the DNA, and so it's part of the nature of the person.
When we were placed on reservations, we were supposed to be given rations: flour, lard, bacon, beans, and they never would actually deliver. So the Crow people and many tribal peoples across the country were starving. And you couldn't leave the reservation unless you were going to go hunting. And many times even those requests were denied. So men who at that time, their role was to provide meat and protection for the villages, their role was stripped from them. They couldn't hunt to provide the meat, and they couldn't provide protection anymore because their role as a warrior was just completely taken from them.
They cut off our hair and they washed our mouth out with soap when we speak our language. So when I like to talk, I like to say, fuck those motherfuckers, you know what I mean? Because this is the white man's language. The white men talk like this. They showed us this English. Fuck those motherfuckers. In the Native American language, there is no cursing. We can't say fuck or fuck you or asshole. But this is the white man language. That's how bad they discourage us, and they impose their will on us. And when we get discouraged, we have nowhere to go but drugs and alcohol, man. And these adults are doing it, and these kids are watching it. And it's just a repeating cycle, man. We need to break that over here today, and that's what I'm trying to do with my kids. I'm trying to lead by example. I'm an addict. Today, I can go do meth and drink alcohol if I want, because I'm an addict. But you know what? If I do that, I'm failing my son.
So now we have a generation of emasculated men, right, on the reservation. And we have a generation of women trying to solve the problem to the point of breaking themselves and becoming addicted to alcohol, prostituting themselves for food and money to buy food and feed their addictions. But that was 200 years ago. Look at where we're at now. It's almost the same situation. People are doing things that they didn't think they would ever do for their addictions. There are still families who can't provide for themselves, who can't protect themselves. There are still emasculated men on the reservation who can't provide protection for their families, who cannot provide food for their families. You can't sit back and tell me that that isn't a generational problem.
I didn't get to see what my mom had to go through until I had to see for myself. Going back to the reservation, it was like a stage before hell. Like, right when you go in, you could feel the broken sorrows, the broken hearts. You could just feel it. I see 12-year-olds doing meth. And that just breaks my heart because I have a 12-year-old brother. So right when after I had to experience going to Lodge Grass and having to see it for myself, I thanked my mom and I told her, I'm sorry what I put you through, and because now I can see why you're so strong. they sacrifice so much. And just for them to get taken away and die from hypothermia. So that's why I am here today. Because I can't see it go on anymore longer.
That system was put into place 200 years ago to do exactly what it did, to break down the people. And it broke down a lot of people who then taught their children to cope in unhealthy ways, who then taught their children to cope in unhealthy ways, and so on and so on and so on. And pretty soon, culture becomes dysfunction, and they get intermingled and confused for each other.
When you're working in tribes and you're working in budgets, and your line items should be very specific, and when you work in a tribal government, you're able to move a little bit of funds around here and there, so then they get this Robin Peter to pay Paul attitude about everything, and so when these funds come in, we're hoping they go to the right department because they have enough money. Right now in my own reservation, I keep, for a long time, I kept saying, we need more cops, we need more money, we need more cops. Well, then a lady took me aside one day and said, they have the money. They need to spend it correctly. They need to quit piddling it away.
And I've seen it time and time again. Someone will be elected into office. They're a totally different person. All of a sudden, they only hire their relatives. They only want certain people close to them. They only want certain people to have jobs. They only want certain programs to succeed. They don't care about this. They don't care about that. Education, no, whatever. We don't need to fund that. We don't need to fund this. We don't need to do anything for the youth. We don't need to really care about the elders. But it all comes from the idea of, I have to take care of myself while I have the means to do it. And once I'm taken care of, then I have to take care of those close to me. Then I'll worry about everybody else. But that's not an Apsalagat teaching. That is poverty. And it's permeated our government, that mentality, to the point of federal indictment. We've had so many of our leaders indicted in federal court, convicted of federal crimes. It was kind of the running joke in Montana that if you were the chairman of the Crow tribe, you were going to get federal charges for embezzling or misappropriating funds.
Well, the challenge with contemporary tribal leadership is it's based upon a European model, or American model more specifically. And that is that we have leadership that's elected, and we have a constitution and bylaws, and we have all of this formality, these different departments and compartments. And so it's based upon a system of government that's not traditional. And in a traditional sense of government, our leaders, instead of being, the richest people in the community, they were oftentimes the poorest, because there was an expectation that they needed to be caregivers for their. And so part of it is we need to instill a sense of what is important in traditional leadership, wisdom, generosity, and openness and fairness. All of those things that I think in politics are considered to be negative attributes, and we need to start modeling our behaviors on what worked in the past rather than what's failing in the present.
When you live in an area that's so economically depressed that the only way you can add jobs or prosperity is through government doing it versus business propping this stuff up. So what happens? You get $5 million from somebody. You bring it in here. You hire 25 people to deal with that $5 million. You got a couple people doing this, couple people doing that. You got this bureaucracy, and it leaches down, and it leaches down, and this being the ground right here. These are the feet on the ground. By the time it gets there and you start with this, you've got just this little pinpoint. The money has a hard time getting to where it's supposed to be on the ground.
philosophically, we always need to think that what we do today, how does that impact 7 generations from now? And so it's that thinking on the long term, thinking of how our great-great-grandchildren will be impacted by a decision that we make is something that we need to get back toward.
What I think right now and what I'm pushing for is we need more women to run for these positions. These are all positions we vote in, whether it be in a county, whether it be in a tribe, whether it be in a state. Get your women running. Let's get some women in there. Let's get somebody, whether it's a man or a woman, somebody who wants to take this issue along with them, because if you're not heard, you won't ever be helped.
And so we wanted it recognized that we needed to start keeping track of our people and what was happening to them. That was the main reason for the bill. And the reason I remember this is because it happened here on the Northern Cheyenne, and it was during the 4th of July celebration. They had a dance, fireworks, so we went to the event. But what we always remember is Hannah out there dancing, just having a good time. And then a few days later, the powwow starts, and then we heard that Melinda was looking for her daughter, that she was missing. And Melinda said she had gone to the local law enforcement, the tribal law enforcement, spoke to the sheriff. And this is typical for them to say this, oh, she's probably out there partying, don't worry, she'll come back after the holiday. But you can go ahead and look for her yourself. Well, Linda loves her kids dearly, and that's the reason for this act, is because she did not quit. She and her family organized a search party and eventually found Hannah's body near the rodeo grounds that we have here. And she had been there. She apparently had been killed on the same night where we saw her dancing.
We are a portal for information. We keep the database of all missing persons. Our entire job is to support law enforcement with missing persons, but what Hannah's Act did provided us with one person who specifically could help with missing person cases. And what they do is they act as a liaison to law enforcement. They act as a liaison and help people who report missing people and help them in that process, because it can be very confusing. Folks don't understand the jurisdictional issues that might be there, especially when it comes to tribal, whether they should report to tribal law enforcement, whether they should report to a sheriff's office, whether they should report to the FBI. So what that person does with Hannah's Act is helps them specifically with missing persons.
Do you think that the Hannah's Act is enough or just a good start, or what do you think? Because I know it only hires one individual. Correct?
It's a start. To be honest with you, we need more. One of the I was just explaining to Ms. Small that it's a foundation. We've laid the foundation, but we also have other issues that we really have to attend to. We actually need an office. I believe at the state level there needs to be a mobile command center, that when there's an incident that they can come alongside wherever it's at. Their needs in terms of the justice, criminal investigators are needed. Training is needed, so that the different Indian nations can carry out their own investigations.
I was curious, do you think that Hannah's Act in particular will kind of help smooth some of those jurisdictional boundaries out, or at least as far as communication and information is concerned?
Hannah's Act will help and has helped in communication. It will not resolve jurisdictional issues. What it does is it helps facilitate dialogue where our missing persons specialist can help put agencies together. who's in charge, who's got search and rescue, who's doing this piece of it, what things are missing. Family members, we need more information from you on this, and that way while law enforcement is out conducting searches or doing their investigations, the facilitator for missing persons can kind of help put those pieces together and provide more support. So I think it goes much further than it had before.
Mm-hmm. Do you think one person is enough, or do you think there needs to be more positions like this?
Yeah, I think having an advocate in certain communities would be helpful. That way it's one-stop shopping, so that we would know who in each community to call. If there's a missing person, who's the advocate there that could kind of help us connect with the family, connect with law enforcement, and put those pieces together. I think that would be great. It would certainly improve on things.
Things can change, but you gotta want it to change. I never thought I was gonna change. I thought I was gonna be stuffing needles in my arm. But I want it to change, and for my kids. I don't see how these people around here can have kids and look at their kids and continue to do things like that. That means I don't have the strength. That's why we gotta be here to help them strengthen themselves. We need to help one another, pick up one another when we fall.
You're gonna have to be able to always still stay positive and still understand that you're still good out there. You can do. You can't feed into the negative and start saying, "Well, they're just gonna do this. They're just no. We don't know what people are gonna do, you know. So we need to start at our own level in our own backyards. It's, you know, before we try to change somebody else, change our own house, change our own neighbors, change our own community, build up from there.
We were taught not to say anything. We were taught to just be quiet about it. Just keep doing what you're doing in life. Just, you know, don't try to bring the best in the world, you know. Just leave it as it is. That's why there is racism and stuff, because we leave it as it is. And it just confuses me because they're like, you know, like, you gotta be strong and a warrior. And I feel like a definition of being strong and a warrior is making a change. And putting water to the soil of what was left in the res. And with water is life. So if you just bloomed that out, you know, at least if it was just one seed. And I think of Selena like as a seed too. Like, she's a seed in our soil, in our reservation right now. So our voices is like also like the water, you know. And it's like with more voices, and not only with Selena, just all the seeds of all of the unsolved or, you know, hypothermia cases, or just no justice for these cases. And I think of them all as seeds just sitting in the soil right now. And I feel like every voice counts, and every case counts, no matter how old it is. It's still a seed, and they're still there.
I will find justice. I will push and push until justice is done.
Justice for Sarah! Justice for Sarah! We want justice! 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 We want justice!
Siguli Swagweg, Gela Hindi Neo gets again. I hope that you got something from that and enjoyed that. I think it was well done. There was some very powerful commentary and conversation in there that I think kind of triggers people to maybe think about things. You know, my father used to always tell me, um, never depend on anyone. If you want something to change, then change it. Don't rely on or expect others to do for us. So the lesson is kind of mixed in with all that is if we represent ourselves in a good way, then it'll spread to those around us because behavior breeds behavior. If you act hostile and angry and violent, then the people around you will be hostile, angry, and violent. So there's a certain amount of responsibility we have to take on ourselves as in the way that we represent ourselves. At the same time, without backing down, because we do have to stand up and we have to be the voices for those who can't be the voices for themselves. So that's really ultimately what we have to do. And so this whole missing and murdered Indigenous women epidemic that's in Canada is not going to change until we all kind of get on board and push for a change. And that includes us Indigenous men, because, you know, along with the fact that a lot of our women are being killed by non Indigenous people, there's still a certain amount of domestic violence that happens right within our own communities. And if we abuse or hit our partners or our children, then we're teaching our partners and our children that that's okay and that that's accepted, and it's not. So we do have to take that onus on ourselves to change as well. So that's just kind of one of those things that is kind of gets passed down from generation to generation. So if we can continue to start teaching to be respectful of our women, then our children are going to ultimately learn that they need to respect their mothers and their aunties and so on. And then that gets taught to their children, um, and so on. So for the next 7 generations, that's what we're thinking about is how do we teach the children and grandchildren and great grandchildren how to be respectful to our women. And that all comes back to us as the indigenous men. So the other thing, in case you weren't here earlier to see the links I put in here, there is Camp Morgan link. There placed two things that can always use support. Camp Morgan itself, just for daily needs like food and firewood and propane and stuff like that. There's a link there that you can support them if you have the means, as well as the family of uh, Linda Beardy, who is the latest woman sister to be found at the Brady landfill. If you can possibly spare anything to help with that family as well, they can certainly use it as they go through this tough time right now with having to deal with not only funeral expenses and childcare, but they're doing this through an emotional roller coaster as the law enforcement out there tell them this happened or this happened and this happened and then it didn't happen, and the flip-flopping of the story and the investigation that goes on out there. So keep that in mind. Also, if you follow the Camp Morgan on Facebook, you'll see that they're actually selling these shirts too, to help with raising funds. So this is artwork that was done by Cambria Harris, the daughter of Morgan Harris. She's done this piece, and then she has done another piece since this. Um, that you can get and purchase as a way of showing support as well. So I've got the two stories or the two incidences and updates covered that I wanted to update today. Um, I'm going to play a version of the Peaceful Warrior as I always do at the end of each of my streams, and I'm going to look for someone to raid. I appreciate everyone coming in here, and especially I want to thank Nabil 225 for resubbing, Nova Geometricide resubbed, and my homie Dotero for the raid and bringing your community over here. I appreciate it, and I am grateful for all of the support. Thank you so much. I will post this VOD up um, in about 10 minutes after we raid, just so that it's available for anyone who missed it or anybody who missed part of it and want to see the rest of it. This VOD will be kept up for you for that. So while I play the next song, I will play the Peaceful Warrior. I will put the raid calls in the chat. So if you could copy one of them, copy the raid call first and then refresh your screen so that you're counted properly when we go over and raid the next streamer. I want to try to raid someone I haven't raided before. So keep that in mind when we go over it. Whoever we go over to, it's someone it's someone I haven't been to before. It's someone's stream I haven't raided before. So let me find the Peaceful Warrior. Okay, so the version I'll play um, is I'm going to play a jazzy version of this song because first of all, I didn't ever think that this song would go do jazz or fit the jazz kind of style, but this couple called the Bylines do such a good job of it, and they really surprised me at how well this song fits the jazz genre. So I'm going to go ahead and get that um, playing. I'm going to get my face off the screen, and again, thank you, big Yonko to everyone for being here and hanging out. And so let's get this song playing, and we'll get ready to go raid someone here.
Our names are Marin Reese, and we're at war for peace. All senseless attacks we see must cease. What are we doing here? What do we really want to say? This world has got to change its way. We're going to battle for the red, white, yellow, and black. Fight for the ones who can't fight back. Oh, we're talking about all the creatures from the water to the sky. Talking about the issues from the truth to the lies. Gonna make my stand with a paper and a pen. You wanna argue that? Go back to bed again. 'Cause you're never gonna win against what I stand for. So sit down and shut up and listen as I give my grand tour. I'm gonna target the corruption in our government, target the poison in our environment, the injustices to the people. And every target I won't keep still. Gonna battle the battle of battles, shake up the cage till it rattles. 'Cause you'll never get rid of me till all of us are free. Our names are Marin Reese, and we're at war for peace. All senseless attacks we see must cease. Gonna fight for the red, person's voice than any weapon of choice. Our names are Mare and Reese, and we're at war for peace. All senseless attacks we see must cease, but we won't be able to move this world all alone. Just remember, this is also your home. So if I put my voice with your voice and we all shout together, people are gonna hear us. Things are gonna get better. It's already not enough. Our names are Mare and Reese.
Dark Native, welcome on the board.